Oh man, what's going on here? What are all these names? This must be people that support the program. That's it. These are Patreons. That's right. Look at all these kind folks supporting the program. Some of them, like Calvin Graves, have been around for like 4 years or longer. We'll look up the length of time some of you guys have been here one of these days, but we are slowly lurching into motion as far as making a little more of the Patreon and giving you guys a little bit back, bringing out some new content, thanking you guys for all the support. Where are we? Here we are. Hello, Sean.
Hello.
How's it going? So, happy Mother's Day. We have an incredible presentation for you guys. I will just show you the outline. We're going to be goddessed out by the end of this. We're going to talk about the different archetypes of goddesses, and we're going to go into Middle Eastern goddesses, Welsh and Irish goddesses, Greek goddesses, and a couple of randos. So we're going to see themes and ideas running through all these. Me and Sean have done a ton of research last couple days to really make this solid. You know, neither one of us are mythology professors, but we are attempting to get it right. You know, we're obviously looking at mythology in order to deepen our enjoyment of a fictional story. But if we're going to touch on this stuff, we're going to try to get it right, of course. Sean is a learned man. We both are basically people that just are doing independent research. And Sean, you went to college and stuff, right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure how much a business degree really helps me with any of this stuff.
We're just people looking. Right. So we're essentially just people looking stuff up and trying to get it right. And it's great stuff. We both love mythology. And, are we going to talk about Marika from Elden Ring? No, but we did in the Elden Ring stream with Eldrick Stoneskin, and Michael talks about stuff. So check that one out. We're going to mostly talk about real world goddesses. Pretty much we picked the ones that seem to have correlations to A Song of Ice and Fire. We're not purely chained to that. We will take a minute to just tell the story of some of these goddesses and enjoy them. But we'll also obviously talk about the many correlations. I mean, we've got characters named after goddesses, both Ashara Dayne and Circe Lannister. I added the Greek Circe in here, Sean, last night, by the way, after we talked last. So I got the leannán she in there because Lyanna Stark, also named after not a goddess, but a fairy queen, close enough. So lots of things to talk about. But yes, as you saw, those were Patreon names. And those were all the people above the $10 level. So it's our Patreon tiers named after the kingdoms of the world. And if you'll just permit me, I'm going to take just 3-4 minutes here to talk about Patreon, and then we will get started with the program. So I've been mentioning, and this has a little bit to do with my recent fights with YouTube, if you've tuned into any of that. It's all of a piece. But essentially, Patreon is a program that we use you guys can donate monthly and support us. And the main thing about this is that it allows me to be free somewhat of the pressure of YouTube. There's both pressure as far as what kinds of content, how many ads to put in videos is a big press right now. You may have noticed a lot of the videos have like crazy amounts of ads, is because they're trying to have this program where the AI places the ads for you, which would be fine in theory, except for it does a really bad job. It puts way too many in. So as I talked about on the YouTube social media subscription feed or whatever, I made a post about this. And basically, I put in my own ads so that they're not too many. But without getting in the weeds there, the point is, like, there is pressure from YouTube to do certain things, to make short content, generic content, clickbait stuff. And I try to resist that. I do resist that. And I think that's why you guys like, what I'm doing, what Sean's doing, people like us that are obviously passionate about what we do. Patreon is the thing that really, and I'm speaking for Sean as well, because Sean has a tremendous Patreon that you should also check out with a lot of exclusive content. And basically, it allows us to have a stable monthly income that offsets the wildly fluctuating Google income, the YouTube income. That's the short version of it. So first of all, thank you for all of you who are signed up to our Patreons and have been, since the beginning. Like I said, Seagraph, if you're in the chat, say what's up, buddy. It's been a long time. So in any case, you guys make this possible, and you make it possible for us to have integrity and to do this long form content. When I started off, I would have been shocked if you had told me how many people were actually down to go this deep on history and mythology and world building and all the stuff that we love here. And I can do that because of your support. So we are we are doing. We are putting more into our Patreon here and giving you guys more as a way of saying thanks and to encourage people to become a part of it. So these are our levels now, 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, and 100. There's different rewards for each one. And we've named them after all the best places that you'd want to live. Mostly, I mean, the Valerian Empire is debatable. As long as you're a Valerian, it's pretty good. We'll pretend you're one of the activists for civil rights and stuff in Valeria, like Einar. In any case, Kingdom of the Ithacevron, Kingdom of the Fisher Queens, the Rhoynar, Kingdom of Sarnor, Valeria, and the Great Empire of the Dawn. These are the places you'd want to live. And so, as you saw, Fisher Queen patrons get their names on the video, which will update this basically once a month. If you didn't like how your name appeared, we are using either your Discord name, if you put that in Patreon, or your Patreon name. So if you want us to use your Discord name, just add it and we'll use that. Or you can even just edit your Patreon name if you don't have Discord and you want it to be other than it was. And then, the idea is I want to work for you guys more than I work for Google mentally. And the more that we make that true with Patreon, the more I am accountable to you guys instead of, the Google at the algorithm or whatever. No. Oh, I said my phone was all like, yes, can I help you? No. Would you like some AI assistance?
Yeah, we're all Siri in this household, but yeah, no, I it's a big reason why I've focused my efforts heavily on Patreon. I definitely am not doing this for not only Google structure with YouTube. It's awful, but it's also just it separates you from the people who actually care about the content you're putting out. So yeah, Patreon's great. It's unfortunate that, it's just so direct that you're just like having to give us money, but we really, really appreciate it. And, Dave, I don't think people realize how much work it is for you to put out content more than once a week. And not just in the stream where it's a lot of riffing and a little bit of research, but the hours editing in terms of videos, it's brutal. I'm trying to do it with, a job going, and it's damn near impossible. So it's, we really, really appreciate it. Everybody who not only contributes on Patreon, but, shows up and engages in the chat, subscribes on YouTube, really, really anything, even social media, which I think we both hate. But are you muted?
There we go. Just to get it out of the way. I definitely remember that time of riding the line of having a regular job and trying to do this on the side, and just like, it is really busy. And now I'm doing a different, somewhat stressful but enjoyable thing of this, making this a business and taking this seriously. You guys know I've hired Maynard Plum, got a manager, trying to keep things organized and constantly grow the channel, bring you better content, bring you more content. And so, yeah, that's like when you're trying to plan a business, the more stable the revenue stream is, the better you can plan for the future, hire employees, and continue to grow the thing. So YouTube fluctuates, Patreon is steady. That's the idea. So, so here's some of the things that we're doing. So to your point, Sean, in order to fight against the sort of disassociation, we do these live streams every Sunday, and we've extended this live chat community to our Discord. Thank you, Nerdo, by the way. Appreciate you. Discord is a benefit that we give to all of our patrons, as well as our YouTube squishers. And we even give it away for free. Like if you can't support the program monetarily, but you feel a part of it and want to be a part of the Discord, you can join Patreon at the free level and get the invite to Discord. So this is our way of extending this live stream community and our little corner of the fandom to make it more cohesive. And now it's a place where people do movie nights and book clubs, and it's way beyond, I'm not over there running the thing like a dictator. It's like well out of my control. You know, it's just all of you self-organizing and having fun, forming little communities where people are nice to each other and take each other in good faith and stuff. The way the internet was meant to be, I think. Yeah. So here's a cool thing that we're doing for Patreon members, $5 and above. Basically, any paying member of Patreon, you get access to the Lightbringer gallery, where I have not yet uploaded, but will shortly be uploading all of the commissioned artwork that we've done. So Daenerys the Dreamer and Balerion, the High Tower, the Black Gate, there's a bunch more. Even going back to Atlantis Morissette's Gemstone Emperors, which is a donation and not a commission. But these will all be in a gallery, high-res downloads, so you guys could download, use them as a screensaver. You can print them out. They'll look nice. The Daenerys the Dreamer Balerion from Urtak is like 6,000 pixels, so that's hot. And then just real quickly to wrap this up, we'll be doing some t-shirt giveaways. There's 2 different ones. So if you're at the $15 level, that's Roy and our patrons, you get entered in one giveaway for the t-shirt. That's one per month. And then if you're $20 and up, you get a second entry into a second giveaway. So we'll be giving away 2 t-shirts a month from our store, which we'll keep expanding and doing more stuff, which also many of those are commissioned art pieces as well. We always list the artist's name under the t-shirt. No AI art here, of course. And then at the Valerian patrons at 50, you will be able to sponsor the next art commission. So as we keep doing these commissions, which I want to do more of, we will essentially rotate from the $50 and up patrons, and we will dedicate the art in your name. So when I introduce the art in the video, we'll say thanks to, sponsored by Melanie Moonbreaker or whoever. And then, yeah, you'll be like the sponsor of the thing. Your name will also be listed in the gallery where the art is displayed as the sponsor. And then no one's joined at $100 and up the Great Empire of the Dawn. But if someone wants to do that, you know, hit me up. What do you want? What you need, buddy? Like little, I tried to offer Sean before like a 1 hour video hangout to talk about whatever. I don't think people really, I don't know if I didn't advertise it enough or if people didn't, that was like too intimidating or something, but yeah, tell me what you want. Like,
I think what it is you have to, you remember the very specific poetry we got into last night.
Oh, I've got that locked and loaded, buddy.
Oh yeah. No, but you have to say it sensually in a one-on-one with them. It'll get really
I will intense. Read the courtship of Inanna in whispers. Yeah. Whatever it is. But yeah, the point is actually at that level, what I would be interested in is talking to you about what you like about the program and why you want to sponsor. Because at that point, you're almost like, not an investor, but like some sort of investor level sponsor. Like, yeah, like, you know, tell me why you believe in us. What's that?
On the board.
Yeah. Very much so. And so that's it. And if you're a t-shirt winner, which we'll start these next week, I believe, just email us at lightbdv or contact us on Discord and then give us your information and we'll ship that out. So that being said,
can I get a quick plug in here?
Oh, absolutely.
So anyway, yeah, you guys have seen me on the program before. I'm sure you are all subscribed to my YouTube, my Patreon. I'm still putting content out. The most recent content I put out for Patreon was a chapter read of the Iliad, the coldest opening of any book ever. And today I actually released 26 minutes ago, finally, my Beowulf video. So Beowulf Part 1, Tolkien's doomed hero Beowulf. I'm really excited to finally get that out. I've been spent a long time on it, and I'm mostly done with Part 2. It was originally going to be one video, but Part 2 will be out next week. But finally, it's over. I returned the ring to the mount. And yeah, please go watch it. I put a lot of work into it.
Yeah, I definitely know how that feeling of this is going to be one. I'm gonna have to split this in half. So I need to get it schooled up on Beowulf. That's one I keep skirting around. So I'll definitely look forward to that. And there we go. And so, yeah, happy Mother's Day. Let's talk about goddesses. Thanks for listening to my Patreon pitch or whatever you call that. So, can we get Sean's links in the description? Yeah, so, I think I wrote the description before I added Sean. Yeah, so it's Hero with 1,000 Voices if you go to his YouTube channel. But Patreon is what? What's your Patreon?
It is patreon.com/the hero with 1,000 voices.
The Hero with 1,000 Voices.
So the Patreon has the YouTube does not.
So I will get that in the description after the stream, and I'm sure one of our mods will pull the link and drop it in the chat momentarily, because my mods are like that. So thanks, guys. And yeah, Patreon's easy. Just go to Patreon and type in the name of the channel you want to support. It'll come up. Type in David Lightbringer. Type in Hero with Voices. It'll come up. You know, that's how it works. So, all right. And yeah, I was brainstorming this live stream, and I was scratching my head, and I was like, you know, Sean, he knows his Greek mythology pretty well. And a lot of these goddesses were Greek goddesses that I was starting to realize we needed to talk about. Of course, I did a 90-minute video about mostly Vedic goddesses, primarily Kali and Parvati and Sati. And if you want to check that out, please do. I'm probably most proud of that video, of any video that's on this channel. And we're not going to recapitulate that. We will refer to Kali and a couple things here and there. But basically, we're going to talk about some of the goddesses that I originally meant to talk about in that video, Sean, but had to cut because I was just vamped out on the Indian stuff so much. So we're going to do, I'll just bring the list up real quick. A lot of these Sean brought, I wasn't going to talk about, and Sean brought them in, and then I vamped out. So we've got, from the Middle Eastern goddesses, we've got Cybele, perhaps the oldest named goddess in the world, the lioness goddess, Asherah, Canaanite goddess. We've got Isis from Egyptian mythology. We'll also mention Hathor as well as Nut. And then we've got Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte, which are, they potentially were different, but were joined together. There's a famous Sumerian and Akkadian goddess. A lot of Dani inspiration there. Welsh and Irish goddesses such as Danu of the Tuatha Danann, the people of Danu, as well as the Welsh correlation Dawn. We're going to talk about the leannán she. Rhiannon is one that was suggested in the Discord, and we vamped out on that a lot. I learned a lot about Rhiannon in the last couple of days, so that was really cool. Shout out to Fleetwood Mac, of course, and Queen, and all those great bands. So, yeah, you're wondering why I had an eagle. See, we've got the lions. We got the... Actually, this is perfect with the two lionesses here, or two lions. It's just like Cybele's throne. And then we've got, of course, the Morrigan, which we'll also mention. And then for Greek goddesses, Circe. It's not quite a goddess, but...
Oh, she is, yeah.
Okay, yeah. She is technically. There's a lot of classes.
So, yeah, sure. She's got a... her father is a Titan and her mother is a Titan. So she usually gets the... She's called a goddess in the Odyssey anyway.
We're obviously... Yeah, fairy queens. You know, it's all... We're counting all that. So Circe, Aphrodite, Hecate, Demeter and Persephone, Eos, and then we're going to go through several classes of Greek nymphs as well. So, going to be fun times. But we're going to start by talking about, Sean, some of these general concepts which are going to flow through all of this stuff, such as the Earth Mother.
Right. You got to, plow the earth, right? As we were saying.
Yes. yes, we do. Plow the fertile fields.
I mean, there's a reason it has stayed a euphemism for 5,000 years.
It's not even a euphemism in that poem, what we're going to read. But yeah, the idea of Mother Earth, like just the basic concept of it, has to do with the miracle of birth. Like, one of the things I want to stress when we're talking about all this mythology is that we in the modern times are somewhat insulated from the rawness of nature. One of the places where we are not is childbirth. It is still raw as anything can be. Okay. It is carnal. It is animal-like. It reminds you that we are animals. Like, it's dangerous, but it's also a miracle. Literally creating life. It's possibly the greatest miracle when you think about it, like reproduction, producing a new human being with a soul. Like, think about that. If you believe in the soul, not only is the mother producing a new human, but somehow serving as a vehicle for a soul to incarnate into this human. Like, it's fully magical. And so that is the reason why people, that is like the beginning of the idea that this is a goddess. Like, there is some archetypal form of goddess that expresses the concept of reproduction and life-giving. And so the most natural correlation to this is the earth, which of course produces life. It produces fruit, it produces animals, it produces all the bounty that we live off of. And it goes through these cycles, which remind you of childbirth, where, you know, the woman swells up and gives birth, and then there's the portion that comes after, the sort of recovery, you know, and it's similar to the cycle of the seasons. We also see the idea of the mother goddess being like, probably the most important thing we're going to see through all these myths is mankind's relationship to the earth. And it becomes gendered when it's the goddess and the sovereign king. But really, the core concept is actually all of mankind and nature. Okay? And so our relationship to nature is expressed in these myths. And so if the goddess is treated well, she bestows favors. We're going to see that over and over and over. Often it's a drink, you know, that expresses richness or enlightenment, or it's fruit, or it's children, prosperity, legitimacy of rule. All these things are conveyed by these sovereignty earth mother goddesses. And you can see the next point, sovereignty goddess. It's a theme we see all over world mythology, where a king or ruler. Well, go ahead and explain this one, Sean.
Yeah, it's, you know, where does a ruler derive their authority from? And it's usually two, and we've talked about so much, you know, the sun god and the sun disk. But for one, there's also, you know, the sun goddess, and that's something that we get into today. But it's also just the, like, divine mother. And in some, they were literally the child of a divine mother, or at least that's how they present themselves. You know, it's good marketing. But yeah, the idea is you have to get your divine authority from somewhere. And where else is that authority, you know, most recognized than the Earth Mother herself?
And it's very similar to the Fisher King concept, where the king's health reflects the relationship to the land. If the king doesn't rule well, the land doesn't produce, and the king becomes infertile. So it's this parallel relationship where the legitimacy of the sovereign comes from their stewardship of the land, of the people, etc., of their culture. And so we often see kings marrying either the goddess straight out, or they'll marry a woman that is an incarnation of the goddess, or they will perform rituals that symbolically marry them to the goddess. We see many variations of this, but it has to do with this concept of sovereignty. And so as you do the research, you will come across many sovereignty goddesses, quote unquote. It is a kind of archetype. So often it is the same as the Earth Mother, but it can become separated. In fact, Sean, you know, the general course of mythology is that it expands and bifurcates and becomes more complex over time, especially when we're talking Proto-Indo-European mythology, but also all the mythology that stemmed from the Middle East and then spread out over Europe with the Anatolian farmers before the Proto-Indo-European people. We like, essentially, there might be just originally one goddess idea. And then as people separate out, her forms become separated into parallel forms. Other people have the idea, well, this different aspect of the goddess, actually, that's the daughter of the goddess, and she's a separate figure, because these are all concepts. Right. So the idea of like the maiden mother and the crone, these are different things, functions, roles that women play at different times in their life. They can be considered multiple aspects of the same thing, or we can separate them out so that we can talk about them separately. It's all mythic concepts, basically.
Right. Well, and George did a particularly brilliant kind of interpretation of this. You bring up the Fisher Kings. He has his Fisher Queens, and then we have always kind of interpreted the original sin as, you know, Azor Ahai against Nissa Nissa, and kind of the silencing and dispossession of the woman. And then all of a sudden, you know, we have Huzor Amai, or which one was that, the right one who took over? Yeah. So, you know, he takes over from the Fisher Queens, and then all of a sudden the kingdom falls apart. You know, they have all of the problems. It's exactly the Fisher King, except the crime is different. You know, it wasn't the Fisher King's misrule, it was the mistreatment of the Fisher Queens.
Well, and we even see that he claims to be the last descendant of the Fisher Queens in order to get that legitimacy of rule over that region. So it's a similar concept. And also all the other wise kings and lords came to the Fisher Queens to take counsel and gain legitimacy, gain their favor. So it is definitely similar. Dani is one of the biggest sovereignty goddesses. You'll notice that all the sovereignty goddesses usually marry multiple husbands. That's because when there's a new king, they have to remarry the goddess. They have to renew their covenant with the land. And so you notice Dani, Drogo is a king, Hisdar is a king, Jon will be a kind of king, Fagon is a king, Quentin was courting her, he's the Prince of Dorne. Victarion is he technically is promised the sea stone chair by Euron, because he thinks he's going to take the Iron Throne, and Victarion plans on. He thinks he's going to trick Euron.
I'm starting to see a pattern, but and this all dovetails really well into the womb tomb idea we talked about, and you've talked about in past videos, where, you know, if you are the life giver, that also gives you a measure of control, or the measure of control over death.
Absolutely. I'm just skipping ahead. George refers to this concept in The World of Ice and Fire, talking about the warrior women of the three cities that are on the Bones Mountains. It is said that the fortress cities of Bayasabad, Samiriana, and Kaya are defended by women, out of the belief that those who give birth are the only ones permitted to take life at will. This is also a concept we see with Kali. Kali, actually, I always say that wrong. I've been corrected. It's Kali as opposed to Kali. I'm saying it like the Indiana Jones movie.
Oh, God. Is that what got all of us? All right.
Yeah. It's on the second accent, Kali. And it's also like faster. You don't linger on it. Anyway, point is, she exists outside of time. And she creates time, and she is the creator and the destroyer. So she is a depiction of the cosmic womb tomb, the creative ocean of darkness from which everything emerges and everything returns. So basically, this conception of reality is like, these cycles of life begin and end in this ocean of chaos. They come out and they come back. So that's what we're seeing with a lot of these chthonic figures. Is that the Earth Mother, sometimes the darker forms, she will be more of a chthonic figure. She's a hag figure, a crone figure, possessor of ancient wisdom, and has more to do with the death end of the cycle. So let's jump ahead to that part, Sean, on your notes here.
Well, and real quick, you mentioned, and we talked about this a lot yesterday, where, you know, you have one goddess who's kind of, you know, a larger domain, who kind of evolves into multiple goddesses, sometimes because of an epithet, sometimes because they just, you know, have multiple cultures kind of divided out as they mesh. But like that's very much in tune with what you're talking about right now.
I've just been told that it is Nut, not Nut, the Egyptian goddess, sky goddess.
Oh, I didn't know that either. I had so many of these, and Cybele, I was also pronouncing wrong.
You know, it looks like Cybele. Yeah.
Right.
And there's even a Cybele's pizza in San Francisco that everyone calls Cybele's and not Cybele, but that's all right.
There used to be one in my tiny hometown of Lafayette in California, and then they got busted for putting drugs in the toppings. But anyway,
Cybele's cult also intoxicating substances and frenzied rituals. So that tracks, actually. But go ahead.
Yeah, they were really just trying to get shamanic with it. But so we look at this. Most mythologies have a powerful, wizened old woman, whether that's, an aspect of the triple goddess or the main goddess, or whether it becomes separated, whatever. The crone, the hag, the witch. We see it a lot. The Slavic Baba Yaga. If you look at older versions of the Baba Yaga, it was actually a trio. The Fates and the Grey Sisters in Greek mythology, the Norse Norns. They're all over the place. And they have control over fate. They have the gift of prophecy. They know everything that's going to happen. They're associated with the loom of fate, weaving it, cutting life threads, that kind of thing. And while there's a definite fertility motif in the mother goddess, they kind of have the inverse. They have the loss of fertility along with death. They're often winter associated. And we definitely see these figures in A Song of Ice and Fire, and not least of which the literal crone in the Faith of the Seven, Ghost of High Heart, Maggie the Frog, Old Nan, all following in that pattern, in that archetype.
Yeah, and of course, we're going to mention the Morrigan, absolutely, as well as Hecate. These are definitely the kind of goddesses we're talking about. And Maggie the Frog, Ghost of High Heart, Old Nan. There's a couple more too. I guess there's the wildlings have Mother Mole and Morna White Mask,
right?
And just the whole Woods Witch concept, really. So
well, and if you're mentioning the Morrigan as something that usually blows people's minds, is that Morgan Le Fay is patterned after Morrigan, and Le Fay just means the fairy.
Yeah, I was reading about that connection. Of course, there's argument about how much, but clearly there is some level of inspiration there. So then we've also got Miri Mazdur, Melisandre, who appears young, but is actually very old. That is another thing that a lot of these crones can do. They can appear as a beautiful woman or transform into a beautiful woman, or back and forth. So definitely talk about Melisandre as well. And then there's Lady Stoneheart,
right?
Another crone figure. And the reason why they know fate is because they are symbolic of death. They are psychopomps. They exist outside of life, all things like that. So in Ice and Fire, George talks about the crone of the Faith of the Seven having opened the door of death to let the first raven into the world. The ravens and crows, as eaters of the dead and carrion birds, are often associated with these gods, chthonic gods, whether male or female. So the Morrigan especially has the ravens, as well as the Valkyries and things like that. Valkyries and Morrigan are very similar. We're going to talk about that.
There's a lot of blurring of the lines between the Valkyries specifically and the Norns.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
There are a number of different stories where the Valkyries are literally weaving a battle into existence. So
and again, just like if mothers can bring you into the world and incarnate your soul into your body, then it figures that they can undo it. Or whatever, right. If we're making deities to express concepts, how do we express the concept of transferring from the physical life to whatever comes after, according to your belief set? It's another kind of birth, death. It's a birth into the afterlife. And so it's again going to be a goddess that mediates that. But it's a slightly different aspect of that figure. So, and we've also got horse and river goddesses that we're going to get into. And it occurs to me that these are both expressing a similar concept. This is the bounty of the land. So a lot of times the goddesses will be the earth itself, and sometimes their children will express the bounty of the land. So their children will be horses, their children will be flowers, their children will be trees and fruits and rivers. Now, like we said, a lot of the two biggest things that the sort of overarching great mother goddesses are usually associated with is either the earth or the sea. And if it's the sea, then it's the primordial ocean of chaos. It's that womb tomb idea. And so we see river goddesses and sea goddesses that are also embodiments of creation in a similar way. And so rivers, if you think about rivers have a lot of symbolism. And some of it is sexual. But it's also rivers are life-giving. It is literally like the lifeblood of the earth. It makes all the plants grow, keeps us alive. It's just fresh water. You know, most ancient settlements are either going to be on the shore of an ocean, or they're going to be on the banks of a river, or they're going to be along a trade route. Like, those are the three places where you find ancient civilizations. So we're going to see some river goddesses. And then horses in particular, we're going to see, because a lot of these religions are Proto-Indo-European based. And that is a horse culture. The horses are the bounty of the land. Their entire culture expanded and grew prosperous because of horses. So they were an expression of the richness of the land. And the first horses ran wild through the steppe, much like a river. And they had to be tamed and brought under control with a sort of relationship of care in order to prosper. So we're going to see a lot of horse goddesses. Go ahead.
Well, it's why it's such a good microcosm with the Dothraki, that they are a horse culture. They theoretically, it's the Khals who rule, but when they go back to their capital city, they're ruled by these crones. They have the womb of the world lake. They have the mother of mountains. It's all very much folding into this. And Dany, of course, gets pregnant there and gives birth, a little bit later. But yeah, it's very powerfully symbolic for the Divine Mother.
There's not only birth, but rebirth symbolism, as Dany and the moon are submerged together into the lake and come back out and things like that. So yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. We're definitely going to go back to Vaes Dothrak in a minute.
And her brother dies. So they definitely get the womb tomb there with the important symbolic death of a sun king who's literally, haloed in gold as he's dying, crowned for a king.
And if we extend it to the whole funeral of Drogo, we see that all the people that died, Rhaego and Drogo and Viserys, are reborn in a way in the dragons. And this is mediated by Dany acting as the goddess and facilitating that rebirth. And Mirri Maz Duur as well. We see the dragon pop out of Mirri Maz Duur's forehead in Dany's vision, just like Kali and Parvati and so many Indian goddesses that pop out of one another's forehead. That's how the different forms incarnate in Indian myth, essentially. Like Athena. One form of the goddess pops out of the forehead of another to incarnate the more vengeful aspect or something like that.
Right.
So, so that's, Athena, let's get into this. Oh, go ahead.
Athena as well. She's basically like the reincarnation of a more motherly goddess. She's not really infertility herself. But yeah, it's interesting story to say the least.
And so, and then the last archetype that we'll talk about is the monstrous mother, or the mother of monsters, or both. This gets into the original Dragon Slayer myth. And this research is by John Grigsby, who has done a very good translation of Beowulf that I plan on reading to bring it around full circle. But Grigsby has this crazy 100-page thesis, master thesis that he wrote. And it is tracing the origin of the Dragon Slayer sunrise myth back to about 10,000 BC, somewhere in northern Egypt or the Levant. And basically, this is a myth that is common between Proto-Indo-European cultures as well as Middle Eastern cultures, which is where I picked up on it. If you watch my Chaos and Creation Chaos Comp stream from like 4 years ago, I was pointing this out. I was saying some of these Dragon Slayer myths are in all the Proto-Indo-European mythologies as well as the Middle Eastern mythologies. It's got to be an older myth that they somehow have in common. And of course, just to talk maps real quick, Proto-Indo-Europeans, the Yamnaya, they come from the steppe just north of the Caucasus Mountains. Caucasus Mountains. The Caucasus Mountains are in between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Just south of the Caucasus is Turkey and the Middle East. So there was a civilization called the Mycop culture, which was ruling those mountains at the time, and they facilitated a lot of trade back and forth as well as cultural mixing. In any case, the Dragon Slayer myth, here's what it is according to Grigsby. The person who slays the dragon is usually a solar king or the son of a solar king who's a storm god. And that is because this is about the sunrise. Okay, so the dragon is the darkness of the nighttime. You can't see the horizon. Everything is dark. But then there is a wound. There is a bright yellow, orange, red line that splits open this dark beast, splits them in half. And then from their body, the land emerges. Because as the sun rises, the darkness separates into sky and earth, and all the features of the land become visible. And so we see this myth over and over, where either a dragon or a great cow or a giant in Norse myth is slain, and from their body parts, the rivers and mountains and seas and the sky are fashioned. And so this is basically a dramatization of the sunrise. And so it is the sun, or it is, again, the storm god, like the storm wind, and using the lightning as channeling the power of the sun to slay this beast. So it's Marduk and Tiamat, it's Indra and Varitra, it's all over the place, okay?
Right.
And so this dragon slayer is the sun, or using the sun as a weapon, so it's got a bright golden sword. It's splitting open this dark monster and creating everything from its body. But this monster is also, this is the mother. It's the dark ocean of chaos from which everything is created. You can see how that concept maps onto this. The nighttime and the darkness, you can't see the shape of anything. Everything is formless. It's all potential and mystery. And then when the sun rises, we have creation mimicked. Okay? And so essentially, this is what's at the root of all the Dragon Slayer myths. And so George actually refers to this, or some version of it, here in A Dance with Dragons. It says, this is Barristan. He saw no sign of dragons, but he had not expected to. The dragons did not like the rain. A thin red slash marked the eastern horizon where the sun might soon appear. It reminded Selmy of the first blood welling from a wound. Often, even with a deep cut, the blood came before the pain. And then the paragraph goes on to describe the pyramids and everything taking shape out of the darkness.
Right.
So,
and that even sounds like birthing in the way that he's describing it.
Yes. Yes, it does. And so we've got the dragons are gone because they've been slain. Literally, they're being slain here as the sun rises. So very cool. And this also tracks to Jon Snow, whose death comes right in the chapter right before this chapter. He is dressed all in black. He's slashed across the throat. And similar to this, the blood appears before the pain. It wells up, and he barely thinks that he was cut. And actually, his jugular was cut because you don't have a lot of nerve endings in your neck, and he doesn't feel it. But the blood is welling up beneath his hand. So this is a direct reference. Jon essentially is the dark monster being slain. He's a personification of night, even though he's male instead of female, because George does frequently flip the genders with all this stuff, as does real world mythology.
Right. Well, and he comes from a proud tradition of it too, with, Rhaegar the dragon and Robert the storm god reenacting the chaos conf on the Trident River.
Yep, right. Rhaegar.
Yeah, well, and then Rhaegar doesn't get to consummate with his leannán she, unfortunate.
Well, so let's jump ahead to that one. Actually, that's the great one that we can talk about real quick, the leannán she, since we're talking about Rhaegar. The leannán she, this is a beautiful woman of the Aoshi, and she is her name translates to fairy lover. And there's older mythology, and then there's like newer mythology that's been repopularized by Yeats, W.B. Yeats rather, and Jane Wilde in the late 19th century. This sort of popularized a new form of her, which is mostly what people think about, but they don't seem to be inconsistent. The root idea is that she represents inspiration, but it's a kind of inspiration that costs you everything. And so she is the form of a fairy mistress. This is Yeats talking. She seeks the love of mortals. If they refuse, she must be their slave. But if they consent, they are hers and can only escape by finding another to take their place. The fairy lives on their life, and they waste away. Death is no escape from her. She is the Gaelic muse, for she gives inspiration to those she persecutes. The Gaelic poets die young, for she is restless and will not let them remain long on earth. This malignant phantom. And so the idea is that it's a kind of inspiration that makes you very potent. You create a lot of stuff and you achieve greatness, but you start to go crazy and you burn out and you live a short life. So brief but inspired life. That is what became evolved out of this myth of a fairy lover who essentially, the original myth is more like you get one night of carnal pleasure with this fairy queen that you will never forget, but then she's gone and nothing is ever the same for you. Like nothing, it's the dream lover, okay? Right. And so and there's Irish folklore about this, like a king who dreamt of this dream encounter with a fairy and he wakes up and she's gone, and then his whole life becomes empty because he's searching for her and she doesn't exist.
Well, an iteration of that, like they kind of made a dark version of that for Dracula.
Yes, the Dracula is partially inspired by this more vampiric idea of the she. I did run across that.
Yeah.
And so if we look at Rhaegar is a bard and a poet. He did live a short but inspired life. And he did fall in love with Leannán, who wears a flower crown like a fairy. Okay.
And it ruined him.
What's that?
And it ruined him.
Yeah, but it's Leanna's fault. Blame her. Blame the 15-year-old girl. You heard it here first.
I thought that's what this whole stream was about.
No, that's not what it's about. The idea was giving Leanna credit for having agency and choosing her own path.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day. No, it's just the myth that George is playing with. Of course, we're also going to talk about Hades and Persephone, which is the other major inspiration, and how the idea of an abduction has evolved and actually wasn't the same in the original myth, but we'll get there. So that's Leanna. Like, George has been using that Laia and Leah name in books going way back before A Song of Ice and Fire. So he probably is a fan of Yeats, and he probably has had this Leanne and she idea in his mind for a long time. We know all the world building of the Others and the Children of the Forest, at least a lot of it, comes from this Irish folklore of the she and the Fomorians and all that stuff. So,
right. He literally called them his icy she. So.
He did. And that was like back in the 90s. So,
right.
But let's go back to the beginning, Sean, and talk about Cybele.
Yes.
So she is an Anatolian great mother goddess, kind of the only one. So the Phrygian kingdoms revered her, and she may descend from an ancient lion goddess that is found in many figurines at Cailleach. And this is 7000 BC. This it's descended from the culture that created Göbekli Tepe and those other ones, we think. It's a contiguous culture of megalithic hunter-gatherers that became megalithic farmers, basically. For example, the Göbekli Tepe T-shaped pillar monuments become smaller, and we find them in the home after they stop building the circles at Göbekli Tepe. So Cailleach is a descendant of that culture, and we've been finding these statues of a very voluptuous Venus-type goddess figure, and she's always flanked with two lions. She's got her hands on their heads, and it's like a throne where the lions are the arms. And so this is potentially if that is Cybele, then this would be one of the oldest goddesses that we have a name for, if that Cailleach goddess is Cybele. So that's pretty interesting. And she is associated with wild nature, hence the lions, frenzied rituals, intoxicating drink. She is a mother goddess, but particularly emphasizing the untamed, raw nature that will definitely bite your head off if you don't treat it with respect. And she became later the patron great goddess of the Romans through a mythical Trojan connection, which kind of makes sense. If she's Anatolian and Phrygian, it makes sense for the Greeks to say, oh, well, she was the god of the Trojans. And so it was the Romans who would have said that. But remember, the idea is can you summarize the connection between Troy and Rome?
Yeah. So basically, they were big fans of the Iliad. They had a character who's kind of a minor character in the Iliad, Aeneas, and he is the son of Aphrodite, or in their idiom, Venus. And he basically leads to the founding of Rome. He journeys all around the Mediterranean. It's actually a straight ripoff of the Odyssey. And the idea is that all the Roman Caesars can claim ancestry from this figure, Aeneas, as well as the mythical founders, Romulus
and he
Remus.
fled from Troy, right? Like
he
the
did.
fall
He
of
was
Troy.
A prince, essentially.
Right.
And he
was he like Hector's brother or something like that?
What?
Was he like Hector's brother or nephew or something?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
He was from that royal family, I believe. I think in another tradition, he's like not actually part of like Priam's house, but he's royal from an allied nation fighting for Troy. It's
mythical history, but the whole point is to tie the foundation of Rome to the older legitimacy of Troy, which puts them in the Greek world, but opposed to the Greeks, I guess, is the idea.
Right.
And so later, they said that the Romans adopted Cybele because they said, oh, well, she was the goddess of the Trojans, which, like I said, is kind of true in that Homer's version of Troy is a semi-mythical version of a real historical city that was in northern Anatolia and probably would have worshipped Cybele. So, And
to be clear, when we're referring to Anatolia, that's modern day Turkey. So it really was very much a crossroads in terms of migrations coming to Europe through the Middle East.
Absolutely. And so Cybele's cult spread into Rome. She became a patron great. She is called the Cybele Mata or Mata Cybele or something like that, meaning the great goddess. So she becomes the mother of all things and things like that. Interestingly, she is associated with mountains and rocks specifically, probably because she comes from Anatolia. It's very mountainous. But she's particularly, her manifestation is like at the top of a mountain. And her biggest cult center was at Pessinus. And I copied from Wikipedia because this is a good summary. And so in 205 BC, alarmed by a number of meteor showers during the ongoing Second Punic War, very powerful omen, meteor showers, the Romans, after consulting with the Sibylline books, decided to introduce the cult of the Great Mother, Magna Mata, which is Cybele, to the city. They sought the aid of their ally Attalus I, who was the king of Pergamon, who's another kingdom in northern Turkey. And following his instructions, they went to Pessinus, which has this cult center of Cybele, and removed the goddess's most important image, a large black stone that was said to have fallen from the sky to Rome. And it was only like a decade later that Elagabalus brought the black meteor from Syria to Rome for his god. So the Romans are collecting like holy black meteors during this time for some reason, which I just got a kick out of. I think George is more drawing from Lovecraft with his black meteor, but it's always cool when you find one. Elagabalus does seem potentially like something he drew from.
Well, and he's definitely, there's a lot of European tradition around meteors that he's very much getting into. But yeah, it's when you take from one, you take from all. Turns out people had a similar way of viewing the world.
But of course, we've got the maid of light and lion of night.
Right.
Okay, the maid of light is Amaterasu, a Japanese sun goddess, and the lion of night is some sort of like a dark lion god. Okay, but here's a lion goddess who is associated with a black meteor as well. So potentially, it could be coincidence or it could be something that George was figuring in. The main thing I think about with Cybele is Circe, and the idea of Nissa as a child of the forest, and George putting all this Catwoman symbolism on the children of the forest, because Nissa is really like the great goddess archetype of the story.
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, she slots very well into both of the major lion mother goddesses that we talk about, Cybele and Sekhmet as well.
I didn't even think about Sekhmet. You've been doing more Egypt lately. Do you want to say something about Sekhmet? I was going to jump to Greek Circe.
Okay, yeah. So just real quick, Sekhmet is kind of an incarnation of the sun. which is, not surprising considering she's a golden lion. But she's also kind of part of Ra. So Ra has three major incarnations depending on the time of day. His entire existence is a cycle. He's a dung beetle, he is the sun itself, and then he is a falcon-headed god, and Sekhmet is his eye. So her title is the Eye of Ra, but she is also kind of an independent goddess, also representing the sun just as much as Ra is. Egypt was a huge place, and there were a bunch of different ways of worshiping things, and they all kind of got jumbled together. So it gets confusing at times. But she is a war goddess, and a god, but also because she was capable of inflicting harm and poison, she's also a healing goddess. Because you always got to get those inverses.
So, actually, Devoted to Mariah's got a great point here, and thank you for that. She's saying, Dani is the maiden made of light and the lion of night. If she turns her back on the world, that side comes out to punish men for their wickedness. Drogon. Drogon is the lion of night. That's her aspect. Okay, so right. Drogon and Dani should be considered one and the same. And Drogon, if you remember, Drogon is named after, he's a reincarnation of Balerion. And George has a black cat in King's Landing named Balerion by Princess Rhaenys to help us make this correlation between the black dragon archetype and the lion of night archetype. So we've got Balerion the black dragon, Balerion the black cat, and then the lion of night the black cat. And so yes, Dani is the maiden made of light, Drogon is her lion of night. They are functionally part of the same thing, and that expresses her wrath. Just like I've always said, the lion of night is essentially just the dark face of the sun. There are two aspects of the sun, made of light and lion of night. Go ahead.
Well, you talk about Balerion, and the Baal part is obvious, but one of the things we talked about yesterday is when we're talking about horse gods is when Poseidon and Demeter both turned into horses and then had a, baby horse god named Arion. So Baal, Arion, and then we have, Drogon as Drogo, a horse lord, very much representing the same thing.
Yeah, the name George's linguistics is incredible. So Balerion, as we talked about a couple weeks ago on the Secret Stream, this is like edited out of the Secret Stream stuff, so this is good that we bring it back up. Balerion seems to be a combination of Baal, or Baelor, really, as in Baelor of the withering eye. Like Baelor is an evil sun god. His singular eye withers everything. He symbolizes the destructive aspect of the sun and blight and drought. Just like some of the Egyptian, is Sekhmet? That's not Sekhmet. It's
She definitely does that.
She does do that.
She's
okay,
like the destructive power of the sun.
Yes. Okay, yeah. That is Sekhmet I'm thinking of. And so Baal Arion. So that's the Baelor idea, the withering eye of Baelor, also very meteor-like. But then Arion, the horse. The dragons are likened to horses many times. Dani has tons of horse symbolism, which we're going to get into. And the stallion who mounts the world is going to be Dani riding Drogon to the Mother of Mountains. So it's a combination of both of them. So the stallion symbolism is important as well. Right. Yeah, so Balerion encompasses both of those concepts. And Drogon is, of course, named after Balerion. So Circe. Circe, I will just say that Greek Circe almost certainly is partially inspired and derived from Cybele. If Cybele is the lion goddess from Cailleach, that means that her cult is basically all over the Middle East by 7000 BC. So all these other lioness goddesses, which share aspects with Cybele, like this is one train of thought here, in all likelihood. A similar train of thought, It's not important to draw the straight line and say, well, they got it from this, who got it from that. It's an idea that's being passed around and developed by these cultures talking to each other over hundreds and thousands of years. But over time, everyone knows the great goddess has lions around her. She just does, okay? So let's talk about Circe. I've got the notes here. You know it well. So why don't you take over and give a couple of these points?
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of the Odyssey. But yeah, from Homer's Odyssey. She's a dreadful goddess with lovely hair and human speech. She's a daughter of Helios, the original sun god, or I shouldn't say original because that would be Hyperion, but he was the sun god before Apollo kind of took that over with the new pantheon. And, she has brothers and sisters. All of them have various sun aspects, Apollonius flashing golden eyes that shot out rays of light. That sounds suspiciously like the sun. Hair like fiery rays.
That's Circe that has that hair. Yeah.
Yeah. Her brother keeps the golden fleece, which is like, golden fleece, the shag of a ram, right?
Yeah, it's a golden covering. Yeah.
Right. So you have this horned animal that is now associated with the sun. So it's pretty perfect in that idiom.
And there's the idea of the garment is important. We see both black garments and golden garments. You put them on to be like the thing. It means you're putting on the glory of the sun when you wear the golden fleece. Possessing it is a great thing, so it's like the favor of the gods. Yeah. So all of Greek Circe's golden aspects, her hair and her eyes, come from this descent from Helios. And of course, Cersei Lannister and all the Lannisters golden haired, and they make a big effing deal about it. Not blonde, it's gold. So not hard to follow that. Keep going here.
So she turned the Achaeans into pigs. She lures people in with her singing, which is an archetype we've seen a lot of with sirens. Sometimes it's conflated with mermaids, but the point is like water goddess can sing, right?
She can. Gets me every time.
Guarded by lions and wolves, which is, George is furiously taking notes here.
And those lions and wolves, they turn out to be mostly the transformed people that have fallen into her sway as it happens.
Right, ones who don't become food. But yes. She gets a bad rep. She's actually just trying to defend her nymphs. But so she's a predatory, vengeful female. She's unapologetically sexual, which is, depending on which pantheon you worship can be problematic. But
well, this is exactly the thing that George is always talking about with these troublesome women that might be witches, or maybe they're just, nonconformists. So we see that heavily here, both ideas. She's a predatory, vengeful female luring you in, or maybe she's just a sexually free woman and a sorceress. She's sometimes considered a daughter of Hecate.
Yeah, well, and that writes itself because Hecate is very much in the same fashion. She is sorceress. She's a goddess of witches. She's not associated with the sun. She's associated with the moon in the underworld. But it's like two halves of the same coin. And one of the things that we've been talking about, and we've even talked about already on this stream, is kind of dividing up the divine feminine into multiple roles.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that, Circe, with the whole thing with turning people into, that's what it was. Okay, sorry, I had a loose thought. Think about King Robert, who was very Adonis-like, by the way. I didn't have time to put that in here, but there's two reasons why it's a boar that kills Robert. One is the Adonis myth. The other one is that Circe turns everyone into pigs. And it's even mentioned here. Listen to this passage from Virgil's Aeneid. The roars of this is Aeneas skirting the Italian island where Circe dwells on the way to found Rome. Okay, smartly doesn't land on the island, but he hears the cries of her many male victims, who now number more than the pigs of earlier accounts. Quote, the roars of lions that refuse the chain, the grunts of bristled boars, the groans of bears, and herds of howling wolves that stun the sailors' ears. So the boars and the lions are mentioned first. And remember, not only is Robert killed by a boar, then they eat the boar at the feast. And Robert himself is like a boar. He's large, he's boorish, he's abusive. Okay? And so Circe essentially is eating Robert at the feast when she's eating the boar. And that's taken directly from this myth.
Well, in the next bullet that you brought up was the offering the cup to Odysseus of Robert's a drunk. So it's
And Circe, her whole thing is part of her tale is a caution against drunkenness, because the sailors go there and they indulge on the food and the wine, and then they fall under the spell. So right. Circe herself is getting drunk, but she also uses the alcohol to get Robert drunk so that he dies when he tries to kill the boar. So yes, and this is that painting. And as you can see, the artist, John William Waterhouse, has depicted her on Cybele's lion throne with the two lions. So he at least is drawing that connection.
Right. Well, and not only that, but, Robert's best friend is Ned Stark here, and Sean Bean also played Odysseus.
Well, I'm going to call that coincidence. Sean Bean's been around, but that's cool. And Cybele bore Odysseus 3 sons. However, she tricked one of them into treacherously killing Odysseus with a poisoned spear. Yeah. And in what we have instead is Circe getting her nephew, Lancel, to essentially help kill Robert, not with a poisoned spear, but with the poisoned extra strong drink, so that Robert misses with his spear and gets speared by the boar's tusk. So it's shuffled around a little bit, but you can see how many details from the story of Circe, the Greek goddess, are in Cersei Lannister's story. So that's pretty cool stuff there, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it flows very well from Cybele and Sekhmet, just generally, especially because Sekhmet is usually considered a little bit crazy. So the idea is, she's the wrathful representation of the sun, and she's completely out of control. So they have to actually, in order to stop her from murdering everything, they have to trick her into, eating blood, but then they, put magic stuff in the blood to turn her into her other form, which is a very placid cow.
Well, that is so similar to many of the Kali myths about her rage and bloodlust being a threat to overrun everything, and they've got to sedate her and trick her and soothe her and stuff. Yeah, that is very similar. Very similar. Okay, so let's go to Asherah. Now, of course, Ashara Dayne is a character in the story, and she jumps into the sea, supposedly, and she has a baby that is lost. And she is really, there's not a whole lot with Ashara Dayne's story that jumps out. But what we find is that all of the Asherah ideas and she's a Canaanite goddess, are heavily in use with Nissa. And there's a couple ways that Ashara Dayne appears to refer back to the Nissa thing. But this is really all, think about Nissa when we talk about this. So she is the Canaanite mother goddess. She is associated with trees, sacred gardens, cycles of creation, and serpents. So serpents, because of their shedding skin, are very frequently associated with regeneration and rebirth and resurrection. Also, their curving nature suggests loops and coils. They curl up, Mm-hmm. Trees, same thing. They fruit and flower, and then they lose their leaves and look dead, and then they come back to life again every year. So like the snake shedding its skin and renewing itself, we see a lot of goddesses associated with both serpents and trees. So by now you're probably thinking of Eve, and indeed Eve is a intentionally deconstructed version of Asherah in her sacred garden. This is what's called a religious polemic, and all the religions apparently did this back then. They would write little myths to delegitimize each other's gods, essentially. And so in the biblical story of Adam and Eve in the garden, instead of the garden belonging to Asherah, Eve, it belongs to Yahweh. And the people are just in the garden, and Eve, she was even the second comer. She's from Adam's rib, so it's not her garden. It's not her tree either. But we can see the echo of the fact that it is her tree because she's the first one to reach for the fruit. And so when she reaches for that fruit, which contains the knowledge of good and evil, it's an enlightenment substance, she eats it and then passes it to Adam. And that act of passing it to Adam is the act of the goddess sharing her apples of immortality, if you will, with mankind. So we can see the echo of the goddess even in the Genesis myth.
Right.
And the serpent, similarly, instead of the serpent being an aspect of Asherah, it is now this tempting figure, almost like the female temptress, but split out into, something that later gets associated with the devil, who is tricking everyone into eating the fruit. But the serpent being coiled around the tree is also important symbolism. It's just emphasizing the regeneration as well as the sort of cosmic axis that these sacred trees represent, the turning of the world around the axis.
Yeah. Well, in something that you've drawn attention to before, and it fits very well in George's idiom, is the basically the 13th member of the zodiac, the giant Ophiuchus, with his snake and
wrestling the serpent. Yeah,
right. But yeah, I mean, I look at the deconstruction of the Eve myth. George has clearly done it as well with Nissa Nissa. And God, my favorite iteration of that is with the werewood goddess is Nissa Nissa coming from Naga's ribs.
Right. Naga's ribs, Naga the serpent.
Right.
Yeah. And we see really a lot trees, of serpent. Right? Go ahead.
And they're really trees. So,
well, there's so many serpent ideas with the weirwoods. And we see that the weirwood roots are like serpents, and Bloodraven is a dragon serpent in the roots. So he's synthesizing Norse myth with other things. But the reason why George can synthesize these different myths is because they are similar, because if you go back far enough, they often have a common inspiration and source. Asherah is influenced by other older deities that are tree goddesses in the Middle East. They are all, or they're all cousins. That's maybe another way to say it,
And I always have to bring up whenever we talk about Ashara and her meaning is that George is using some Tolkien etymology. So Tolkien, he has two prefixes for his human kings. The kings of Numenor all had the prefix Tar, so like Tar Menildil, Tar Ecthelion. And then later in Gondor, they all had the prefix Era. So like Aragorn, son of Arathorn. And so Ashara basically just means Ash Queen. So she is, another tree goddess, another, tree royal. It's
by changing Asherah to Ashara, because the ash tree, we're going to talk a lot about the ash tree, but you guys know Yggdrasil is an ash tree, and in Greek myth, the Meliai nymphs are tied to the ash tree, and those are the two important ash tree things. Also in Norse myth, the first people are Ash and Embla, they are trees. So so this deconstructed thing, I've got a video called Eve Did Nothing Wrong on this channel, which has a longer explanation for this. But I just gave you a pretty good quick version. That's the idea. And so the thing here with ice and fire is that, again, Nissa Nissa being a child of the forest, that makes her like a dryad. It makes her a tree goddess, because the children of the forest, they are the handmaidens of these weirwood trees. And if you go back to the green men really seem like symbiotic, partners or manifestations of the tree. Like they might just turn into the tree, or we might just plant green men. Like there's not exactly sure, but Garth Greenhand is a description of the weirwood tree with green hand leaves, because weir and Garth are the same. They're equivalent words.
Right.
So with these tree goddesses, essentially, the reason why George is pointing at Asherah with Ashara Dayne's name is to make us think of tree goddesses. And once we're thinking about Nissa Nissa as well as the ash tree, then we can put it together. Ashara, ash tree queen. That's pretty great. And of course, many of the Nissa Nissa women have ties to the name Ash through one form or another. There's a child of the forest named Ashes. There's a wildling named Rowan, which is the mountain ash, is a rowan tree. Then there's
Willow Witch Eye.
Willow Witch Eye, yeah, that's a great one.
Your favorite, Asha.
Asha Greyjoy, Osha the wildling, and then Ashara Dayne, and there's maybe a couple.
I would argue.
What's that?
Sorry. I would argue that Osha is just an object lesson in unsafe working practices.
Yeah, she's up on the footstool reaching for the weird leaves. It's like you're on the top rung. It's not safe.
Manacles on her feet and arms. That's not safe.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. She is non-compliant. She's very stubborn. That's true. And Asherah also sometimes appears as a master of animals between two lionesses because, again, this is all influencing each other. And in fact, there's a heavy Astarte influence on Asherah. The tree idols of Asherah, which depict her as a tree, are called Astarte figurines. So Astarte also associated with trees. So a tree is very similar to the earth as far as like it's a manifestation of the fruits of the earth, and it's also the cosmic order, like the cosmic axis and the earth itself are related concepts.
Right.
So
the roots hold the soil together. So it's very much a unifying concept.
And Hathor, she is literally depicted lying on her back with a tree growing out of her navel. And she's literally the earth with trees growing out of her, and the tree grows up to the sky. This is related to the concept of Nut, who holds up the sky. If you've ever seen the picture of her, she is like standing with her hands and feet like this. I'm going to go ahead and do it. She's like this, and the stars are like under her. So the stars are on her body. So she's like the dome of the sky, holding up the sky. She's also associated with trees. Or you can say it's split out so that like Hathor is the earth with her cosmic tree, and then Nut is holding up the dome of the sky. But this is all the scaffolding of the world, essentially.
Nut is associated with tree because the acorn is the oak, and the oak is the acorn.
You lost me.
No, I'm just...
It's not nut. It's Nut. I don't think it's related to nuts.
It's not.
Okay. So that's Asherah, the tree goddess. And do we want to talk about Isis next?
Yeah, I think that's a big one. That's important.
Okay.
And it's definitely something George is using. So Isis is the divine mother of the pharaoh in Egyptian mythology, and not just the earthly incarnation of the pharaoh, but Horus, who becomes the pharaoh of Egypt from a godly perspective. So her domains are, she's a goddess of life and fertility, magic, motherhood. She turns into a kite, the bird, not the, parallelogram. But yeah, she's
not the
very
parallelogram.
Often, yeah. There's a lot of confused syncretization with her and Hathor specifically. Her husband is Osiris, who is a corn king and actually dead and the king of the underworld. So once again, we're getting the womb tomb stuff.
Osiris with green skin also, by the way, just to make it clear.
Right. Well, and she resurrects him. She has Horus by him after she's resurrected him. And
let's actually stop right there because that's the fun part.
Okay.
Osiris is dismembered in 13 parts, and she finds 12 of the parts. The part you can't find is the penis, which has been eaten by a fish. And so she uses a piece of wood or a tree for that part. And so then she copulates with him, and that's where Horus comes from. And so, Orange Tabby points out that Dany is channeling Isis when she tries to revive Drogo from his near-dead state by having sex with him. Yes. So this is very similar. And I also think that we could see some version of this with Jon and Melisandre in Jon's pyre.
And the idea that Rhaego is born dead from the dead union is it's an echo of that.
Oh, true. Okay. Right. Also, the idea of, who's the guy with the 6-foot member because he got somebody pregnant when he was dead?
Yes. So that would be ossifer plum, like a bone ossifying.
Ossifer, like Osiris. Oh yeah, like an ossified bone, but also Osiris.
No, but like a bone.
No, I get it. I know. I processed that and I was moving on.
Oh, wasn't gonna let you. All right.
The ossified bone. Yeah, no, I get it. He's got a 6 foot tall boner. Right, it's a bone.
Yeah.
But it's also Osiris getting someone pregnant while he's dead.
Right.
And so we also see this idea with the battering ram called Joso's cock, which is made from the ship. And they turn into a battering ram, and they call it Joso's cock. So it's a wooden cock. And Joso is an abbreviation of Jon Snow, which also has letters of Osiris in there as well.
Yeah,
Jon is an Osiris figure.
A corn king who is dead and will come back in order to be copulated by Dany.
Jon's going to have some kind of magical sex or something with either Melisandre or Dany. Something like that is coming. I'm not sure what. George is pretty freaky. I don't want to box him in or anything on the possibilities. But Dany also has a similar experience. Remember, she dreams of sleeping with Hisdar, and Hisdar's member is a piece of ice. So again, we have this magical sex with this replaced member and somebody who is kind of dead because Hisdar's got the blue lips and he's kind of warlock-like. The warlocks, as we know, are like half dead, and Euron also is slowly trying to shed his humanity. So,
and in order to put a nail in that sexy coffin, there's a lot of implication surrounding Phagon in Dany. Even though I don't think it's actually going to become a thing, it will be foreshadowed and it will exist symbolically. And Aegon is dead. This is fake Aegon portraying a dead person.
That's true. That's true. So yeah, we see the pattern repeated over and over with Dany. And her son is also dead, Rhaego. We sees him in a dream, but he's dead.
Yeah. Well, and the dragons are, dead spirits, right, in lemur theory. So,
according to. Okay, so let's talk about Inanna and Ishtar and Astarte, who are basically considered the same figure. Again, originally they do think that Inanna and Ishtar may have been separate figures that were syncretized, but if so, they were syncretized by like 4000 BC. So it's very old, because in basically what is usually thought of as the first city, Uruk, she is the patron goddess, Inanna, and she is Sumerian. That's the Sumerian form. Later, the Ishtar is the name for the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. Everyone knew they were the same person.
Right.
So it's just a new name for the same goddess. And she also became Atart in Ugaritic, which then became Astarte in Canaanite and Phoenician. Right. So she is known as the Queen of Heaven. She is associated with love and fertility, but also war, whole lot of war. So this is the idea of a protective mother goddess, where the warlike aspect is part of her defense of the homeland and of the city, kind of like Athena.
And Dany, very much a Dany theme.
Dany is got tons of this. And in fact, the statues of Astarte have amethyst eyes. They're ivory statues with amethyst eyes. It's probably the most famous statue of Astarte. If you look it up, you'll find it. I guess I'll just go ahead and do it since I've said that.
Well, and what we were going to bring up later while you're looking that up is the idea that Aphrodite is almost certainly an evolution of this god we're talking about, the Inanna, Astarte, Ishtar. Aphrodite is not native to Greece. It was an imported god. It was almost certainly an evolution of Ishtar. So the idea that these are, Queen of Heaven, morning star goddesses, and Dany gets a lot of Aphrodite treatment. Starlight and sea foam, most beautiful woman in the world, with her, Helen Aphrodite comparison. So she's getting those comparisons in order to draw attention to the Ishtar and Astarte associations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the wrong document. There we go. Okay. So Dany, like you said, clothed in starlight and sea foam like Aphrodite, which we'll get to. But she's also just associated with stars and the heavens. She's whirling through the stars in her own visions. She's flying through the sky on her dragon. Mm-hmm. And so Inanna, Ishtar, again, lioness, major symbol incarnation of this goddess, because again, it's going to make that, this means comparative mythology is happening. And many of her myths involve her taking over other cities. She's young and imperious, always moving and conquering. So this is very much like Dany as a teenager moving through Slaver's Bay and laying waste to these cities. I mean, it is Ishtar all the way.
Might conquer the world and make a TikTok.
Hi, Dany. There she is. Amethyst eyes, like Moon Queen. She's got the moon horns. She is, of course, a Morning Star, Even Star figure. And let's see where we go. She is essentially a triple goddess. And her three forms are the Morning Star, the Even Star, and something called the Princely form, which is probably just like the master archetype or something like that, or daytime if you want. But she is given this triple goddess configuration because she is Venus. And the ancient Sumerians knew that Venus was both Morning Star and Even Star because they're good at astronomy. And so she has a myth of going down to the underworld with her husband being exchanged for her place in the underworld. It's Tammuz or Dumuzi. And basically, without going into the details of it, her movements and the amount of days that she does correlates to the movements of Venus very tightly. Right. And so this is one of the earliest places where we sort of proved mythical astronomy. We proved that the myth is just describing the movements of the heavens and then layering conceptual ideas about culture on top of it, essentially. So,
if only Aphrodite was somehow associated with Venus.
If only they translated to Lightbringer also. So that's the great thing about Dany being an Aphrodite figure, is that it also links her to a whole branch of Venus and thus Lightbringer mythology. Right. So it's just the feminine half of the Lightbringer symbolism. Jon is also beautiful though, so don't.
Yeah, he's blushing like a maiden over there.
Let's actually go ahead and skip to Aphrodite since we're talking Morning Star and since this is all an evolution. Go ahead.
So you're all probably familiar with Aphrodite, Queen of Love and Beauty. But she has a lot of nature associations. She is what colored roses. She's the Lady of the Roses. She's associated with plants all over the place. So you are getting a lot of that mother goddess stuff. And almost every Greek story that she's in involves either her having an affair or her children. So she bestows favors or punishes. It's all very, gossip related. But yeah, like we said, she's partially descended from Astarte, Ishtar, who had the more warlike connotations, something that George brought back with the way that Drogo refers to Daenerys because he can't pronounce her name properly. He calls her Daenerys, like, Danu, the river goddess, and Ares, the war god, who is also famously in a permanent affair with Aphrodite.
Which conceptually is interesting because we've got the idea of war versus sort of beauty and nature itself. And so we can see war often ravages the land and lays waste to it. And so that's why Mars is like pursuing Aphrodite. It's not always something that she wants.
Yeah, well, and then there's the idea that, you leave a battlefield full of, bodies, they decay, the crows eat them, whatever, but then that's very fertile soil later.
So it goes back into the cycles of death and life. Yeah. And originally, of course, if you go back to Astarte and Ishtar, you see this more comprehensive figure that is also in charge of all this violence and war. The Greeks essentially kind of scrubbed that out of Aphrodite.
They did. And what's funny is when Aphrodite evolved back into Venus in the Roman incarnation of the very similar mythology, Venus kind of got her war associations back.
Right. And this is the evolution of myth. It's very interesting to follow these ideas. Kelly with a couple super chats about Dany. How powerful of a sorceress will she become? Well, I think she's going to be using the glass candle and the dragonbinder horn, so you know that I think she's going to become a full sorceress. Will she discover a Valyrian magical tome? Yes. Any Valyrian books that exist in the story that are moving around exist to work their way to Dany. That's the whole point. I do think the Faceless Men might be the ones mediating that. I think that's why they're stealing a book, is to give it to Dany.
I think a big part of how we resolve all of this magical understanding is by realizing that there really isn't a huge difference between the kind of fire magic that people like the Valyrians and Melisandre execute and the Green Seer magic. It's different doors to the same house.
Yeah, certainly related, and it's very vague how much separation there is. We don't know.
Right.
So yeah, Aphrodite does have an epithet, which is her more warlike aspect. Aphrodite Araya. Oh, that's cool. Araya.
Right.
As in Araya Targaryen. That's one that he uses. Yeah. That's interesting.
Lady of the Doves, Lady of the Roses.
So then going on, what did you just say? Lady of the what?
Two of her titles, Lady of the Doves, Lady of the Roses.
We see the doves and birds with some of these other goddesses too. Is this just more sort of nature, purity, innocence kind of stuff? Okay. Right. So then the whole thing about Aphrodite, of course, being born from the sea foam is it is a depiction of the morning star rising from the ocean. And that is why Aphrodite is accompanied by Nereids, which we're going to talk about. It's a sign of ocean nymph. And here is this is from Hesiod's Theogony. Why don't you read this, Sean? This is very dramatic. I'll let you cook on this.
Orinus came, bringing on night and longing for love, and he lay about Gaia, spreading himself full upon her. Then the sun from his ambush stretched forth his left hand, and in his right took the great long sickle with jagged teeth, and swiftly lopped off his own father's members, and cast them away to fall behind him. And so soon as he had cut off the members with flint and cast them from the land into the surging sea, they were swept away over the main a long time, and a white foam spread around them from the immortal flesh, and in it there grew a maiden. First she drew near holy Cythera, and from there afterwards she came to sea-girt Cyprus, and came forth an awful and lovely goddess, and grass grew up about her beneath her shapely feet. Her gods and men call Aphrodite, and Aphrogynia, the foam-born, because she grew amid the foam, and well-crowned Eustephanos, Cytherea, because she sprang from the because she was born in billowy Cyprus, and Philomedes, genital-loving, because sprang from the members. And with her went Eros, love, and comely Himeros, desire, following her at her birth at the first, and as she went into the assembly of the gods. This honor she has from the beginning, and this is the portion allotted to her amongst men and undying gods, the whisperings of maidens and smiles and deceits with sweet delight and love and graciousness.
So basically what you have to do is picture yourself on an island in the Greek islands or somewhere on the peninsula where you can look east and see the sun rising over the ocean. And think about our Dragon Slayer myth. So in that conception, the darkness is a monster that's slain and cut in half by the sun. Here, we are talking about the morning star rising just before the dawn. So it is still nighttime, but this star so we can see both sides of the morning star, even star. When the genitals are cut from Ouranos, who's the sky god, that falling to the earth is the even star action. Right. Okay, so this is the first star in evening, and it appears to fall down to the horizon at the beginning of the night. But then when the cycle flips, it changes position, and it appears to rise just before the sun in the east. And so, against the backdrop of just the first light of dawn, the first shades of purple and pink, we're going to see Venus rising out of the sea. And so this is Aphrodite, the beautiful maiden, rising from the foam of the sea in the morning. And so she is associated tightly with Eos, who I guess we'll talk about next,
Right.
who is the goddess of the dawn. And yeah, that's the legend here. So this is more mythical astronomy. And like I said, the cool thing is what George has done is since Venus is also associated with ideas about Lucifer and Lightbringer and the son of the morning, but also Aphrodite, he's figured out that he can have a male and female Azor Ahai archetype and attach these various Lightbringer ideas to both. So, for example, the Night's Watch oaths and the descriptions of dawn are very similar. And that has clued us into the fact that the dragon steel sword of the last hero is probably the same as dawn, because all of their words and symbols are the same. Similarly here, we can see that all of this Aphrodite stuff that is labeled onto Dany, who is got the starlight and sea foam in that one scene. And there's also regarded as the most beautiful woman in the world. And she's atop the pyramid like the Greek gods of Mount Olympus.
Right.
And so, yeah, men are seeking her out. And all this Aphrodite stuff with her shows us that she is also Lightbringer. She is also part of the Azor Ahai myth.
Well, and what is the type of tree that they have at the top of that pyramid? I remember that
persimmon.
Yeah. So, anyway, yeah, it's very syncretized. Another important part of that myth that we just read is you'll notice that Kronos specifically kills Uranus with a scythe. So this is very much a fertility. He's removing Uranus's fertility.
He's harvesting, yeah.
Right. With something that you would essentially harvest wheat with. And there's for the same reason that the Grim Reaper has a scythe when he's reaping souls. So it's very much both a loss of fertility and harvesting fertility at the same time.
You guys, it's not very long. It's short. It's a short mustache. All I did was shave the beard off. It doesn't you don't grow it like it's a chia pet or a plant from a seed. You just shave the rest and wait literally like a week. That's all. That's all I gotta do. But thank you for the interest. Don't touch it like that on camera. What, did I just ruin the mystery? It's not fake. I told you that already. It's not fake.
I think they're you're tempting them too much.
Is that it? Oh,
yeah.
I'm just gonna pretend to be oblivious to that.
Wait until you're reading the poem. Then you can start stroking the mustache.
Yeah, well, I don't have a chin beard to stroke anymore, so. Okay. Do we need to read this? Oh, yes. So this is some of the more golden ideas I just wanted to mention. They clothed her in heavenly garments. On her head they put a fine, well-wrought crown of gold. In her pierced ears they hung ornaments of orichalc, which is reddish gold, and precious gold, and adorned her with golden necklaces over her soft neck and snow-white breasts. Jewels with the gold-filled horae wear themselves whenever they go to their father's house and join the lovely dances of the gods. I don't know who those are, but some sort of... I don't know. When they had fully decked her, they brought her to the gods, who welcomed her when they saw her, giving her their hands. Each one of them prayed that he might lead her home to be his wedded wife, so greatly were they amazed at the beauty of violet-crowned Cytherea. So she is crowned with violet and gold. These are the colors of the sunrise. So again, this is just the morning star in the morning, cloaked with the colors of dawn, essentially.
Well, and there's an extra layer here with Zephyrus up there, not only being a son of Eos, the goddess of the dawn, but he's the west wind. So if we're talking about the morning star, even star cycle, bringing you from the west to the east to start the cycle again.
Oh, seasons. Horai is the seasons. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. So let's go to Eos.
Yeah.
Where is she? There's. Take it away.
So real quick, just before I start that, it's that the seasons are the same as the night-day cycle from a mythological symbolic perspective. Spring into summer is the day. Spring is the dawn. Summer is the day. Then fall is
sunset.
even fall, right? And then you have winter as the night. The long night was an extended winter. So it's very much something that George uses a lot. So I just want to draw a little attention to that.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. George goes further as far as layering the morning star cycles of resurrection and the green man cycles of resurrection on top of each other with someone like Jon Snow, who is both a morning star figure doing morning star resurrection stuff, as well as a green man corn king doing that layer of resurrection. Right. So it's interesting that it's actually suggested a little bit right here.
Well, it's super important because then you have the green man who has the like 1 day of power during the winter king's domain, and it's Christmas or whatever, where you have, you know, all this food that you saved up for a bounteous feast, even though that's not the motif of winter. And then you have 1 day of it and then it's gone. And it's like, you know, in A Christmas Carol, where they have the summer king exist for a day, have a feast, and die before nighttime. So anyway, Eos.
And so related, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. Goddess of the dawn, her son is Eosphorus, the morning star. Another name for Eosphorus is also, Lucifer Lightbringer, if anybody, remembers anything about that from this channel.
Right. So this is basically a different idea about Venus other than Aphrodite. And so here the morning star is a child of the dawn. That makes sense, right? Like, right. Son of the morning. That's what the title means. Lucifer, son of the morning. Right. That's the idea.
Yeah. And the morning star is the right hand, the even star is the left hand. But yeah, sister of Helios and Selene. Selene was an early moon goddess. Helios, we talked about, he was a sun god and the incarnation of the sun as well. Originally Proto-Indo-European, all of them, specifically her cognate of the Vedic goddess Ushas. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right because I've only ever read it, but she has a husband named Astraeus, who is the personification of the starry sky. And that's who she gives birth to Eosphorus with, along with the four main winds, one of whom we just mentioned, Zephyrus. But if you've ever heard of Boreas, the cold north wind, Eurus, the east wind, and Notus, the south wind.
Oh, that's interesting. Eurus, the east wind, with Euron constantly controlling the winds and sort of sailing from Ashai, which is the east.
Well, in Europe.
Right.
So, yeah. So where does the east wind go to from Greece? Europe. All right. Abducted Ganymede and Tithonus from the royal house of Troy, with varying levels of success on those ones. She basically became a lot less popular as Aphrodite became a Greek figure. So kind of the transition from Mycenaean mythology to Greek mythology. Mm-hmm. She definitely has a very close relationship with the dawn goddesses Ostara or Eostra, who aren't really separate, but I mean, you can even see the linguistic similarity in
It's
Eostra.
Tough. So with the Celtic goddesses, so there's nothing written down for so long that it's a lot of reconstruction. So of course there's a lot of debate about it. And then there's modern pagans and Celtic people that are sort of, I won't say doing their own thing like it's a dismissive thing, but they are renewing the traditions in a way that is more in touch with modern life. And so obviously there's some amount of evolution. Let's just say that. And so, yeah, but there is some that Eos and Eostre, that's the same root word. It's a Proto-Indo-European root word for the dawn. And so Ushas, you could see it's a similar Eos. It's got some similar phonetics in there.
Yeah. Well, and we get the word Easter from it, and that is, Easter is spring. That's when spring starts. So, the Summer King being reborn and all that, which again is identified heavily with night and day, with the dawn being the spring.
And so the whole thing about Eos, or at least probably the most well-known idea, is that she has rosy fingers, and this is the spreading out of light as the sun rises, the sort of pink rays that spread out. And George references this directly in a quote, which I meant to pull up ahead of time.
Oh, the Iron Lotus, isn't it?
I believe that is it.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's a fantastic quote. He also, well, I'll wait.
The rising sun sent fingers of light through the pale white mists of dawn. That's an Eddard Stark one. That's actually not even that. A wide plain spread out beneath them, bare and brown, its flatness here and there relieved by long, low hummocks. And it's the Barrowlands. He points out the barrows of the first men. But yeah, the fingers of light through the pale white mists of dawn. That's Eos.
Right.
And let's see here.
We also definitely, there it is. The dawn was full of shouts. Yeah. So the,
as if the world had turned to chaos.
Well,
I don't think that's the one you're thinking of.
I'm thinking of the one. There it is. Oh no, that's not it.
It's multiple ones. So as the long fingers of dawn fanned across the fields, color was returning to the world. And so this is another one where from out of the darkness we see everything created. George loves to do that imagery, and his fingers of dawn. What you're talking about is the army of Tywin Lannister unfolding like an iron rose, thorns gleaming.
Right.
That's like the dark version of Eos. It's like we turned the rosy fingers into an iron fist that's a rose blooming.
Well, he does talk about a passing god dropping the dew on the ground like diamonds. So
yes, he does.
It's very much the same idea.
That sounds more like Venus and Aphrodite to me.
Right.
With the diamond stars being thrown to the ground.
Yes.
But there's, of course, those related myths. So, and then let's see here. If there's any other. There's characters that have rosy fingers as well, like Dany. Here's one. An east wind blew through his tangled hair, as soft and fragrant as Circe's fingers. He could hear birds singing and feel the river moving beneath the boat as the sweep of the oars sent them toward the pale pink dawn.
Oh, that's great. And it's good. Of course, it's the east wind, because when it's the west wind, Aphrodite, the morning star, Jaime is doing even star stuff here. So it's the east wind.
And then it says, after so long in darkness, the world was so sweet that Jaime Lannister felt dizzy. I'm alive and drunk on sunlight. So it's a rebirth from out of the darkness. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
You see how some of these passages really come alive when you think about the mythology and where he's drawing all this symbolic language from. So that's the point of this stream, is to try to, not only is it fun to talk about, but it just makes it more rich to go back and read some of these.
Right.
And so here's what, this theme is running all through Jaime and Cersei's chapters. The lack of my hand is troubling me. The mornings were the hardest. In his dreams, Jaime was a whole man. And each dawn he would lie half awake and feel his fingers move. It was a nightmare, some part of him would whisper, refusing to believe even now, only a nightmare, but then he would open his eyes.
And that is once again morning star mythology, because the morning star is almost always viewed as the right hand of God. And then the even star on the other side is the left hand of God. And there are all these associations with the left hand being sinister throughout history. It's why we're, horrible to left-handed people historically. But Jaime missing his right hand, saying mornings are the hardest.
Yeah.
Like, of course they are.
It's pretty great. And then it's also alluding to potential loss of sexual virility.
Right.
There. So then we've got Jon. He's got the burned hand, and he is a morning star, even star figure. Also sort of like a dark solar king waiting for rebirth in some scenes. And it says, his fingers feel crabbed and stiff, half frozen. That's the ones that were burned. His fever was back as well. White hot knife of pain.
Yeah. Jon has been waiting about 14 years on rebirth, actually.
It couldn't be long until the dawn, he says.
It's supposed to be 3 days.
And it's when the morning came, none of them quite realized it at first. The world was still dark, but the black had turned to gray and shapes were beginning to emerge, half seen from the gloom. Jon lowered his bow to stare at the massive heavy clouds that covered the eastern sky. Thought he could see a glow behind them, but he was only dreaming. So, it's just more of, again, George loves this whole creating everything out of the darkness at sunrise mythology. And then here's, a gust of wind sent icy tendrils wending through his long brown hair. So again, wind through the hair, just like in the Jaime scene. Half a mile north, the wildling encampments were stirring, their campfires sending up smoky fingers to scratch against the pale dawn sky. So again, this is an inversion. Instead of rosy fingers, we've got fingers of darkness, just like Tywin's iron rose unfurling like a hand. Here we've got smoky fingers, or like Harrenhal's fingers, rising up, scraping at the sky. Same language, scratching at the sky here.
I think the entire chat needs to take a quick drink of water.
What's going on over here? Is it still mustache? What's going on?
Well, they're talking about it being hardest in the morning and
we've been feeding them. We've been feeding them red meat. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're good. Carry on, chat. Do your thing. Don't let Sean dampen your rising enthusiasm.
Look, I got ex-Catholic thing going on here, so the guilt is powerful. You don't have to obey it.
Yes, we knew what we were doing. Absolutely. We haven't even read. Oh, we forgot the poem of Inanna? We did. We skipped it. We're going back for it.
All right, let's give it to them.
We will. It's good that we waited, though. They weren't ready for that. We've warmed them up. We've prepared them.
Well, that's important. We'll foreplay.
You guys are not ready. This is good, though. We're just randomly putting in Fingers of Dawn and then just seeing what's coming up here. There's Oberyn dying in the hands of the mountain. We'll just skip through that. Let's see here. This is, lighting the glass candles, cutting their figures. Oh, they're waiting upon the dawn with bleeding fingers, trying to light the glass candle. So they're trying to bring the light in the darkness, and they're ending up with rosy fingers. That's cool. It's just recycling the idea in different ways. Marillion lost his fingers. Let's see here.
Yes. The bard named after the Silmarillion and the progressive rock band Marillion lost his fingers.
The corsairs come aboard in the darkness before the dawn, and then they cut people's fingers off to get their rings.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of makes you sad for Davos. He'll never have any of those rings.
At the dawn of Robert's rebellion, Mad King had sent to the Eyrie for Stark's head. To get home and call his banners, Stark had to cross the mountains to the fingers. That one might be coincidence, but it's funny. Davos losing his fingers, something else till dawn. Okay, I think we've established that George is working with that symbolism.
Yeah, that the fingers are important in foreplay.
I suppose so. Thought we were trying to beat around the bush here a little bit, Sean.
Oh, no, I was lying. I'm always lying.
Well, with that said, let's go ahead and just read this smutty poem.
Oh, that's all you.
That's all me. Yeah, I'll take care of it. I'll handle it. So this is the courtship of Inanna and Dumuzi. And so it starts with Inanna looking for a husband and her brother Utu, the sun god, making a bridal veil for her. And then he says, you should marry Dumuzi the shepherd. And she's like, but I like the farmer. And extols the values of the farmer. And so Utu says, actually, the shepherd is better. He's got all this stuff, And not only does he have all this stuff, he gives the farmer his leftovers, the cream and the milk. So, he's better than the farmer. And so, let's see. Let's get to the smutty part. The shepherd. So now Dumuzi is approaching the house of Inanna, and he calls out, open the house, my lady, open the house. And Inanna runs to Ningal, the mother who bore her. Ningal counseled her daughter, saying, my child, the young man will be your father. My daughter, the young man, will be your mother. He will treat you like a father. He will care for you like a mother. Open the house, my lady, open the house. And then Inanna, at her mother's command, bathed and anointed herself with scented oil. She covered her body with the royal white robe. Let me zoom in on this so you guys can read along, because I'm not going to be able to actually read all of this. I'm going to have to just point at the naughty words at a certain point. There we go. All right. And so she took her seal in her hand after she's got all her dowry and her royal robe. She opens the door for him. Inside the house she shone for him like the light of the moon. Dumuzi looked at her joyously. He pressed his neck close against her. He kissed her. Inanna spoke. Let me just clear my throat real quick. What I tell you, let the singers weave into song. What I tell you, let it flow from ear to mouth. Let it pass from old to young. My vulva, the horn, the boat of heaven, is full of eagerness like the young moon. And when the horn, that's the cornucopia. The cornucopia is very often a female anatomy symbol in the same way that anything that is pointy and long can be a male anatomy symbol. Towers and trees and mountains and obelisks and things. The cornucopia is often the female symbol because both of its shape and because the cornucopia, what does it do? It pours forth fruit and fertility. So it is pretty bang on for a female symbol. And so that is why her V is the horn, the boat of heaven. It's full of eagerness like the young moon. My untilled land lies fallow. As for me, Inanna, who will plow my V? Who will plow my high field? Who will plow my wet ground? As for me, the young woman. And then she repeats it. Who will plow my V? Who will station the ox there? Who will plow my V? It's the refrain. It's going to say it a bunch of times. And Dumuzi replies, great lady, the king will plow your V. I, Dumuzi the king, will plow your V. Then plow my V, man of my heart, plow my V. As the king's lap stood the rising cedar. At the king's lap stood the rising cedar, rather. Plants grew high by their side. Grains grew high by their side. The gardens flourished luxuriantly. So again, we think of Osiris here. Remember, his member was replaced with a tree. And so here we see Dumuzi. The king's lap is a rising cedar.
Hey, you never have trouble getting wood.
No, that's, yeah. So then we've got Inanna saying, we'll see this is more elegant in the original Sumerian Morse. That's the thing. Something's lost in translation. But nevertheless, he has sprouted. He has burgeoned. This is Inanna talking. He is lettuce planted by the water. He is the one my womb loves best. My well-stocked garden of the plain. My barley growing high in its furrow. My apple tree which bears fruit up to its crown. He is lettuce planted by the water, my honey man. My honey man sweetens me always, my lord, the honey man of the gods. He is the one my womb loves best. My hand is honey, his hand is honey, his foot is honey. He sweetens me always. My eager, impetuous caresser of the navel, my caresser of the soft thighs. He is the one my womb loves best. So the point of reading this is, okay, it's funny, right? Chuckle, chuckle. But this is like making very clear what we're talking about. Like they're focusing more on the earth than the woman here, really. The point is that Inanna is a manifestation of the fecundity of the earth. And so we're going all these things and we're saying the king as the steward of the land and basically representing mankind, we have this act of taming and interacting with the land to grow these crops. Because the crops don't just grow by themselves. Like mankind's got to do stuff. We have to caress the land. We have to plant in it. We have to harvest from it. We have to watch the signs and figure out what it needs and care for it. So.
Well, in something you brought up yesterday, and it's something that we could always use reminding, is that gods aren't people. They are esoteric concepts. So when they're talking about a god having sex with another god, the sex is a way of looking at a union. So those two concepts unifying, like, Zeus, the storm god, and Demeter, the harvest, when the storm waters the harvest, you get spring. And that's their child, Persephone. So it's like, we tend to think of Zeus as, a little bit, assaulty, but it's the idea that sometimes the union of two concepts is not gentle, that it can be brutal and violent, especially when it involves things like storms. So we need to think of these as more esoteric concepts. So when you say that, like, Inanna is the earth here, she is the earth mother. And yes, it's sexual, but it's also just their way of visualizing union.
Right, like, who will plow my fields? Like, the fields are ready, like somebody's got to plant this stuff or else nothing's going to grow. So yeah,
Springtime.
it's all about farming, really. These are farmer myths is what these are. So, oh lady, your breast is your field. Your broad field pours out the plants. Your broad field pours out grain. Water flows from on high for your servant. Pour it out for me, Inanna. I will drink all you offer. So this is more of the river goddess, the rivers expressing the fertility of the earth. And yeah, you gotta drink from that river. You can't be shy. You just got to get in there and get nourished. So that's. I think we'll go ahead and somewhere Maynard James Plum is like having a heart attack. We'll go ahead
The point is made. We don't need to kill James Plum.
He's gonna have a chat with me afterwards. No, I just wanted to sort of highlight how much our modern society tends to clean things up. We talk about the older fairy tales being darker. They're also just a lot more explicit. So I think when George writes some of the stuff in Ice and Fire that's very explicit and carnal, he's kind of embracing the feel of these older myths, which are very carnal and explicit. So where are we going next? You want to do Demeter and Persephone? I think that would make sense.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll move back up to Morrigan and Rhiannon, perhaps.
That makes sense. So, like, as we were kind of just talking about, Demeter is the goddess of harvest and agriculture. At one point, she does get horse associated. Another thing we mentioned earlier, she and Poseidon, she became a horse to avoid Poseidon. He became a horse because he's the god of horses. And together they made a horse god son named Arion. And he's the fastest and greatest of all horses and immortal and all that.
And of course, Arion Brightflame in Dunk and Egg is a very good jouster and is kind of whooping ass in the joust.
Right. Literally kills a lesser horse. But yeah.
He does. You're right. Yeah. That's messed up.
Yeah, it is. Demeter is a previous wife of Zeus in both Mycenaean mythology and in Greek mythology, obviously, for the, for what created Persephone. But she had underworld connotations as a sort of crone figure. But in both Mycenaean and Greek mythology, her name also means mother goddess. So we're getting the womb tomb again, which we're also getting from her daughter, Persephone, who in the original Mycenaean, she was the queen of the gods and the wife of Poseidon. Poseidon was the god of the ocean and the underworld, and he kind of split off into what we recognize as Poseidon and Hades. And Persephone continued to be married to half of that guy's personality. So she is Hades' wife. She is first and foremost an underworld goddess. That is her origin. In the Iliad and the Odyssey, she's referred to as Dread Persephone. We kind of started associating her as a spring goddess much, much later. And it comes from the story of Hades' abduction of Persephone, which one of the things that we talked about is that it's missing context. It's not like a kidnapping. Hades was looking for a wife, and he talked about it with Zeus, and Zeus is Persephone's father. So he is, technically in charge of her matching. So he marries her off to Hades. She's actually thrilled about it, but he did forget to tell her mother, and she was pretty upset about that. But
Zeus should know better, honestly. But he's just has enough experience with women. Menti says, "I hate to tell you this all, but I'm having sausage for breakfast." Well, how very Bill Quiss of you. Go ahead.
American gods. All right. But yeah, it's there, and Hecate plays a very prominent role in that story as well. Just because it's very likely that Hecate and Persephone were originally two parts of what is three parts of the same goddess.
So she finds Persephone when Demeter's looking for her, and then she later accompanies Persephone when Persephone is returning to the underworld seasonally, correct?
And she's the one who saw her get kidnapped.
Okay, that's why she knows where she is.
Kidnapped, right. Yes, and like Helios is involved, and Helios is also, we mentioned Helios earlier. Helios is sometimes associated with being Hecate's father, but usually it's Perse, which is funny because normally they talk about Perse and Perseus as Hecate's mother and father, and it's the same word that Persephone is derived from. So it's like, is she a part of Persephone? And then,
so they're all related concepts. That's the thing. It's because they're concepts, it can switch around from one person being someone else's daughter or sister or mother. Like, it's all about how you want to think about the concepts and how they relate to each other.
Right. And we'll get into Hecate later, but there are more flashing neon signs that these characters are extremely related. Anyway,
Persephone, let me pause you real quick. Okay. I want to point out something here. So Hades is only considered to be abducting Persephone because Demeter's permission was not obtained. This is very like Leannán and Rhaegar. It seems as though, putting the clues together, check out my video, RLJ, A Love Story, it seems as though this was a mutual pairing, Rhaegar and Leannán. But it was looked at as an abduction because Rhaegar didn't obtain permission to run away from her family or anything else, and she's promised to Robert. And so that is why it is looked at as an abduction. That is basically George copying the sort of evolution of the Persephone myth into his story in the form of how different people look at it. So that's pretty on the nose.
It's so good. And Leannán is an underworld goddess. The first time we see her, she is literally a stone monument in a crypt.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's great. And Persephone, originally the queen of the gods, like we were saying. Poseidon used to be the king of the gods in Mycenaean mythology. They were so afraid of her, they didn't even refer to her by name. They just called her Despoina, which means the lady. So she evolved into a much less important figure in Greek mythology and later Roman mythology. But the context is still there with kind of a trio relationship with Demeter, Hades, and Persephone. How much time Demeter even spends in the underworld is very weird, considering her role as the goddess of the harvest and agriculture. So it's very much like a cycle.
Yeah, and with going back to Leannán, she's abducted during the year of the fall spring. Literally during the fall spring, it turns to winter as soon as she's abducted. That's another one. Like, Demeter doesn't allow the spring to come when Persephone is missing because she's withholding, basically, until she gets her daughter back. And so the same thing, when Leannán is abducted, the fall spring ends and it snaps back into this horrid winter because you've abducted the spring maiden. And of course, they're doing a Beltane spring ritual with Rhaegar's lance as the maypole and the crown of flowers on the end of the pole and then on her head. So I've talked about that extensively in the RLJ Love Story 1. And so, when we see her statue with the bleeding rose crown, this is like Nissa Nissa as Jesus language, because Leannán is a Nissa Nissa figure and it's got Jesus's crown of thorns, but it's also the Persephone, the spring queen down in the underworld. So it's a nice fusing of symbols there.
Well, in more to your point, there's actually there's kind of a false start where Demeter is convinced to bring back the harvest, but then they go back to the bargaining table and she brings back winter again. So there is kind of like a false spring in the actual myth.
Oh, that's interesting. So really tightly correlated. All right, so let's do Hecate real first and then move on to our Irish and Welsh myth.
Okay, so Hecate, super interesting. Goddess of magic, witchcraft, crossroads, the moon in the underworld. Like we said, it's very likely Hecate and Persephone are aspects of the same pre-Greek god, attested in Linear B Mycenaean mythology. In Lucan's Pharsalia, the witch Erichtho invokes Hecate as Persephone, who is the third and lowest aspect of Hecate, the goddess we witches revere, and describes her as a rotting goddess with a pallid, decaying body who has to wear a mask when she visits the gods in heaven. So she has gotten the crone implications of this triple goddess, of this goddess cycle, whereas Persephone in the Greek tradition has gotten the fertility aspects of it, the spring.
And of course, this reminds us of a couple things. Reminds us of Cailleach, or Kali, of course, very corpse-like and for similar reasons. And it reminds us of Stoneheart, especially, she's down in the cave, like she can't come out and be seen in public. And she is rotting and decaying. And of course, the other part is that Hecate has the torch and the crone. That's where the crone's lantern idea comes from, pretty obviously. Right. We see Stoneheart, instead of a torch, she has the sword, Oathkeeper, and she has the glinting of the fire in the eyes of the lion on the pommel, reflecting in her red eyes. So there's a two torches kind of a thing going on because it's Lightbringer symbolism. And Hecate's torch is another idea that I think George is wrapping into Lightbringer and bringing the dawn and all that stuff. It's just a female version of this idea of carrying the light through the darkness.
Right. Very, very Lightbringer, very Morning Star, even star. So yeah, like we said, her ancestry is confused, but her father is usually Perseus. Her mother is Perse, an Oceanid nymph, not surprising, whose name means destroyer, but is often thought to be a confusion of her chthonic association with Persephone.
Right.
She's usually identified with the moon, as well as being a goddess of magic and sorcery. So she gets confused and conflated with Selene, Luna, and Artemis, then later Diana, who is really just a moon goddess plus Artemis. So yeah, it's like we talked about, where goddesses evolve and kind of separate into multiple goddesses, or even separate out between themselves just because of an epithet or something like that. It's pretty clear that there's a lot of associations between these, specifically with Selene, Hecate, and Persephone.
And so since we're on the Cthonic side, we will go up to Irish myth and Welsh myth and start with the Morrigan. So the Morrigan, she is the Tuatha. She is a Tuatha Deinan. She is a goddess of fate. When we say goddess with the Tuatha, there's debate because it seems like there's older god forms that become personages when the Christian monks write down the myth. But we're pretty sure that all these famous Tuatha were originally gods. So we're going to call them gods. But you understand the complexity there. So the Morrigan is the Phantom Queen, or the Great Queen. And the root word mor is likely to be cognate with mare, as in nightmare, and also horse. Because remember, the whole Greek legend of the nightmare is based on horses. So that is tied heavily to the Morrigan. She is an aspect of death, or the custodian of death. There's different ways to look at it. She is a triple goddess, and her other aspects include, I think it's Bathi or Bathi, that word that looks like B-A-D-B. It's not pronounced like that at all, but that's the vulture form. That's also called a battle crow, and that is literally her form of her incarnation of death. That one is associated with Banshee, just Bav. Okay, Bav. Love the chat. Somebody in the chat always knows the answer. So the Bav, she is a vulture or death crow, and she makes the horrible sound that is the root of the Banshee folklore. Another incarnation is nymphs, and that represents battle frenzy intensity, and fierceness. And the third one is Macha or Macha. I think it's Macha. And that is represents more the land and the sovereignty goddess idea. That form is associated with horses. And she also takes vengeance for wrongs against the earth. So, this is the main mother goddess figure here in Irish folklore. And also there is some indications that there is overlap between Danu, who we'll talk about in a second, and the Morrigan. So the Morrigan is kind of like the crone version of the great goddess, with Danu being the more life-giving version. So the Morrigan, mostly famous for shape-shifting. She shape-shifts from woman to raven to she-wolf, but she can be a beautiful woman or a crone, a haggard crone. So very Melisandre now, where it's like she can appear as the beautiful woman, but inside it's probably not the real appearance. She often appears bird-headed, either a raven or a vulture head, which would make her essentially a harpy. So, that is a Morrigan thing. And so we think of the harpy of Gis, whom Dany sort of replaces, but also becomes. She's taking the place of the harpy. And she supplants the harpy with the dragon. Go ahead.
Well, and vulture in general, it's always going to be death associated because they're scavengers. They're one of the protectors of the crown, so definitely a sovereignty goddess is an Egyptian goddess named Nekbet, who is a vulture goddess.
Yeah, there you go. So this is a more a lot of these, it's kind of like the sky goddess idea, but then with a predatory aspect layered on top of it. Now with the Morrigan, she is also considered an earth goddess, and specifically her breasts can resurrect the dead, or the milk from her breasts can resurrect the dead. And so again, we see Melisandre. I don't know if that's how she's going to do it with Jon, but she is going to resurrect him. So that's similar. And then Melisandre doesn't have the crow herself, but she has Jon. Jon is like her crow, I think. I guess she's surrounded by Night's Watchmen.
Yeah. So plus, when she's wrong about Stannis, she's going to have to eat crow.
Boom. And so she is similar to, or perhaps descended from, an older Celtic goddess, Cathubodva, who is known as Battle Raven, and also the Celtic Airi, an earth mother goddess who could appear as a beautiful woman or crow, and who used magic in warfare. And the Morrigan is very powerful in war. She has these chants that she can do, and she changes the battle against the Fomorians just with her battle chant. So that is an incantation, essentially. One of her forms is the washer at the ford. And this is an omen that people see before dying, this old washer woman at the ford. Earlier, I mentioned the old lady at the well. That's a similar version. The crossroads. Hecate is associated with crossroads. Some of these other goddesses were too. So this is all psychopomp stuff combined with the water fertility motif.
Right. On real quick, the goddess you mentioned, Airi, or however you pronounce that, I'm fairly certain that's where the name for Ireland comes from.
You are correct. That is correct. And so she is the Morrigan, like I said, very similar to the Norse Valkyries, who inspire battle fury and who choose who will die by casting fetters on warriors. Specifically, casting the fetters on is this idea. Like, she could make you strong, or she could make it so that you slip at the crucial moment. So think of Jon trying to grab his sword as he dies, and he can't. He's been chosen for death by a Valkyrie, essentially, or by the Morrigan. And so the Morrigan also has to do with fate, of course, like the Norns. The Morrigan prophesies the end of the world with her chanted poems. And so Melisandre obviously is prophesying the end of the world, and she's doing it singing in the tongue of a shy. So that's the Morrigan. And as Sean mentioned, probably a heavy inspiration for Morgan Le Fay, who also conveys legitimacy onto Arthur in some versions of the story.
Right. She, like, everybody kind of thinks of her as like Arthur's mortal enemy, but they make peace in basically every version, and she ends up helping Arthur.
Yes, and of course there are different versions as well. Right. And then so I just mentioned Danu. Danu is another major Irish goddess, and she in fact is a Proto-Indo-European goddess, almost certainly. This is another one where you'll see a couple people trying to debate this, but it's really silly to debate this. There are rivers named Dan all across the Proto-Indo-European homeland. The Dnieper, the Don, the Danube, and one other, all flow north of the Black Sea in exactly the region that the Proto-Indo-Europeans first called their homeland and spread through. And then they get to India, and we find the Vedic Danu, who is a river goddess. So the Dnestr is the other one. Thank you.
Oh, and there are a couple that are just named Danu.
Rivers or people?
Rivers.
Yes, yeah. There are. That's true. Literally, the Danube is just Danu with a B on the end. So the reason why all these rivers are named derivatives of Dan is because the original Proto-European river goddess seems to have been some version of Danu. And so in Vedic myth, I mentioned her in the Vedic Dani video because Dani's name is Dani, and Dani is the mother of 3 dragons. Vedic Danu is the mother of Vritra, a 3-headed dragon. Vritra is known as the enveloper. This is a fusion of dragon mythology. So let me explain this real quick. The Proto-Indo-Europeans have the dragon slayer myth that I've already explained. That's when the Vedic mythology came into India with Proto-Indo-European migrations from the Sintashta. I've mentioned them a bunch of times. The Sintashta are the people essentially who migrated through the mountains and down into India, merged with the former residents of the Indus Valley civilization to create the Vedic civilization. And so, but before they got to India, they passed through the mountains, the Himalayas, and the, what's the other range? I forget. The point is, those mountains are where the legends of Nagas come from, the Naga river serpents. They are essentially nature spirits of the river, called Nagas. And in India, all the water comes down from the Himalayas, the Ganges, Indus, all of it drains out of the Himalayas. And so they have the same Naga myths of these river serpents, and they're coming from the mountains. So when the Proto-Indo-Europeans bring their dragon slayer myth into India, there is a synchronization that happens. And so now Vritra, the dragon, he becomes the enveloper who holds back the waters. So he's up on the mountain holding back the water. And then when he is slain, that's the flood season that lets loose the water out onto the plains. So it's still the dragon slayer motif, but it's combined with the idea of Nagas as river serpents. And that's where you get Vritra. And Indra slays Vritra specifically to bring back the rains, but also the sun. Because, again, that's a version of the original Proto-Indo-European myth where slaying the dragon separates the earth and the sky. And that's what happens when we slay Vritra. So it brings back the sun as well. So it's a great fusion of two different ideas about slaying dragons and water. So that's very important. Obviously, something that George is riffing off of because, again, not only does Dani have the 3 dragons, she's heavily associated with storms and water. She is stormborn, and there's a lot of dragon flood ideas, such as Naga, the sea dragon who drowns whole islands.
And she rides her silver around the Silver Sea and the Dothraki Sea, and starlight and sea foam.
She is both a horse and a water goddess because Danu is a river goddess, and that river really does represent the primordial waters of creation. So it's almost the same as an ocean goddess, but she's associated with the fresh, life-giving water of a river.
Well, and another good association is with Poseidon being an ocean god and the creator / god of horses as well. He made horses out of sea foam. So that is another connection to Aphrodite.
Interesting. And of course, the oldest form of Poseidon would be a Proto-Indo-European deity. And back then, the sea that they would have been referring to would have been the Black Sea. And the horses that they found were literally on the steppe just north of the Black Sea. So you can see why those things were connected.
Right.
So she's House Velaryon? What do you mean? House Velaryon symbolism is very complementary to Dany. In that sense, yes. And I talked about that in an old Weirwood Compendium episode about all the seahorse symbolism. So yes, Dany is riding a horse in the Dothraki Sea, and her horse is as gray as a winter sea. So the horse is a sea, and it rides the sea. And Dany, as this river goddess or water goddess, is riding a seahorse in the sea when she's in the Dothraki Sea. That's what you should picture. Absolutely.
And no coincidence that there are a lot of Velaryons in the Targaryen family tree. No coincidence that Dany is, in boats named after dragons.
Right. Boats named after dragons. That's a big one. The Targaryen ships turned into the gods they burn on Dragonstone. But really, Naga, the sea dragon, drowns whole islands. So that's just literally Varitra, the Naga, who unleashes the floodwaters.
Someone got to write a poem about that one.
And so if we go, remember I said that Danu is also a Celtic Irish goddess. So let's talk about that side. The PIE word here refers to, means to run or to flow. So that's Danu, what that is derived from. So rivers, like I said, they're like the fertility of the land, the water of Inanna, the Dumuzi is drinking, okay? And this is similar to the idea of Persephone being the mother of Demeter. Demeter is spring, and Persephone is especially associated with flowers. So she is like the blooming of the spring, the manifestation. So flowers are like the daughter of the spring season. That's the idea. So the rivers are like the fertility of the mother goddess. So Tuatha, of course, or Tua Danann means the people of Danu. So Danu is the mother goddess of this Irish people, essentially. And the Tua are associated with light and the air and the arts and high culture, civilization. Danu's son is the smith god. I believe it's Gobniu. Gobniu in Irish, and Gofannon is the Welsh version. The Celtic version is Gobanus, and this is a god of smithing, architecture, as well as just being crafty and clever and stuff. So that's a theme that's running through these gods. Dany was associated with fertility, but also magic and druidism. Again, a lot of these goddesses are sort of the bestowers of magic power. And she does seem to be equivalent to the Welsh Dawn. Again, there's some debate about it. But I looked at the lineages here and figured out that both Dawn and Danu are the grandmother of Lu through slightly different genealogies. So, for example, Danu is the mother of Gobniu the smith, who was the foster father of Lu. And then the Welsh version of Lu is this guy, Lu Law. I'm not going to even try to pronounce that. But he is essentially also the grandchild of Dawn, because Dawn is the parent of not only Gofannon, who is their version of the smith god, but also, how do you say that one? It's Gwythian. Yeah, Gwythian and Arianrhod, who are the parents of Lu. So, same person, same goddess. And let's see. I think the interesting thing here about Danu being tied to both Daenerys and the Children of the Forest, because the Children of the Forest are modeled off the Tua Danann, gets back to Nissa being a child of the forest. because Dani is heavily symbolizing Nissa, and Nissa is a child of the forest. And so we see that Danu is the mother of the Tua de Danann. So I think that is probably, not only is that confirmation that Nissa is like a queen of the children of the forest, but that Dani's ultimate end game is going to be part of that healing the weirwood net thing that's foreshadowed in the House of the Undying, when all the blood-stained hands of the slaves are like the weirwood canopy, and she's giving her life and fire and sort of falling into it. So,
well, and we see the corrupted version of that, where she almost gives herself to the in the House of the Undying, to the corrupted denizens of the weirwood net, the other, like, blue husks. But yeah, it's in anytime we see this, green sea, we know we're really talking about the weirwood net and the balance of nature. So the idea that, her name is Danu, that she's this mother river goddess, and it's also compounded in one of the other things that we're going to talk about with the Nereids, with Daenerys. You're muted.
I was asking you to explain further.
Okay, so we have the god of the ocean before Poseidon was the old man of the sea, Nereus. And he has his sons who, in older traditions, his sons were all gods and his daughters were all goddesses. The sons were called the Nereids and his daughters were called the Nereids.
I popped a brain cell. What was the transition? We were just talking about Danu and the Tua, and then
Dani's name being a combination of Danu and Daenerys.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's what I missed. So this is a theory that Sean has, which I think has got a lot of legs to it. Essentially that George came up with this name by combining, and this, Sean, this is where you missed the topic sentence here, and skip right on to the heart of the matter. This is the thing I'm talking about. So Danu and Nereus. Dani and then Nerys, because the Nerys part is specifically separated in Nerys Targaryen, who is who's, I forget, who is she?
The sister of Darren the Good and Daemon Blackfire.
That's what it is, Daemon Blackfire. So by separating out Nerys from Daenerys, he's drawing our attention.
That is Daenerys. I mixed that up. It's actually the wife of Aegon the Unworthy. Sorry.
Yeah, it's Aemon the Dragon Knight, who may have had a child with Nerys, right?
Right.
Okay. That's it. So the point is that by separating out the name Nerys from Daenerys, he's drawing our attention to that portion of the name. And it turns out that Nereus is the original Greek sea god, you said, correct?
Yes.
And so his nymphs are called the Nereids. Okay. So go ahead.
So yeah, 50 daughters, or poetically 50 daughters of the old man of the sea. Their brothers, like I said, are the Nereids. Some of them are very famous, like Thetis is the mother of Achilles. And we talk about Achilles as a demigod, but it gets very jumbled because in later traditions, they kind of de-emphasized these goddesses into nymphs who maybe weren't as powerful as goddesses, but originally they were. So it's kind of a dispossession theme, like the dispossession of Nissa. Anyway, Poseidon actually marries one of them. Amphitrite, his wife, is a daughter of Nereus. And you do this just like in A Song of Ice and Fire, just like in medieval history, just like in history long before medieval era, to ensure a peaceful transition, to kind of unite two peoples.
And so this is really funny. So like during Orys Baratheon marries Argella Durrandon, the daughter of the Storm King he defeated, in order to assume the legitimacy of House Durrandon. Right. Dany is marrying his daughter to rule the Myronese. Same concept. So the Greeks essentially did this with their deities when they wanted to transition from the old ocean god to the new ocean god, they had the new one marry the daughter of the old one. I just think that's so cute.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very, very George themed. And just the idea of like Danu being a river goddess transitioning to becoming, you know, a full on sea goddess is, it's kind of poetic in the same way. Because we talk about, you know, those are the Nereids, but there are also things like naiads in the same vein as, you know, you have your Melii and other tree nymphs, dryads.
And the important thing, I think, for Ice and Fire here is that the Nereids, they were said to reveal to men the mysteries of Dionysius, who is the green man in Greek and Roman. You know, well, the Greek version is Pan, so.
Yes.
No, the Roman version is Pan.
Well,
which is it?
Yeah, Pan is Greek and Roman, but he's older, like Indo-European, Proto-Indo-European.
Okay. So Dionysius is
so he's complicated.
Different.
He used to be, well, he's sometimes portrayed as horned, like cheetah spots, or sometimes it's just his sacred animal is the cheetah, and he wears a cheetah skin. He definitely, you know, he has all those nature motifs, but it's complicated because he was originally in like older than Greek tradition. He was the son of the underworld. He was the son of Poseidon and Persephone.
Okay.
And so he had a thing.
And then there's also Bacchus too.
Right. Which is, the Roman version of Dionysus.
Okay. All right. Well, these are all similar horned figures is the point, and inspiration for the Green Man mythology. So whenever we see one of these guys pop up in the story, we're looking at parallels to Ice and Fire that involve green men or green seers or anything like that. So here we've got these water nymphs associated with Dionysius. That's pretty interesting. And the same thing for the Melii. They're also pounding around with Dionysius. Or the ocean. Which one is it?
Well, the idea here is that Poseidon used to be the god of the ocean and the underworld. And so these Nereids, these daughters of the ocean, giving secrets of the underworld makes a lot more sense.
Okay. And so this basically, so Danu, Nereus, essentially, these are two similar goddesses, both having to do with water and the ocean. Right. And so we see, that's again why we see Dani as a sea goddess riding a seahorse around the sea, being stormborn, etc. So then we've got the Okeanids, the water nymphs. They are the daughters of Okeanos, and he's the freshwater ocean that encircles the world. So this is a slightly different concept than the salty ocean. This is more like the firmament.
He's a titan rather than a god too, so it's kind of, and you can't ever figure out where that delineation is.
The titans seem more like elemental forces to me, like straight up.
Yeah,
but I guess all the gods represent. I mean, well, no, some of them are more conceptual as opposed to like based on nature forces. So, in any case, Okeanos, freshwater, god of freshwater. His nymphs include the dryads, who are tree nymphs, the Nephilae, who are rain clouds, and that's the same root word as the Nephilim, who come from the sky, as well as nymphs having to do with cool breezes, pastures, and flowering meadows, because all these things are nourished by fresh water. So the Okeanid nymphs are not all ocean nymphs. They are things that are associated with fresh water. And among them are the Naiads. Okay. And one of those is, this is all, see, the Naiads and Dionysius, they are named after a mountain called Mount Nysa. That's what turns out to be the case here. The Naiads raised Dionysius, son of Zeus. And so now we've got Nissa, an elf fairy, raising the green man, who's also like the chosen one, the son of God. So this is pretty powerful for the idea of children of the forest helping to raise green seers like Bran or resurrect last heroes like Jon.
It's also a huge echo of Zeus.
What do you mean the echo of? Oh, because Zeus himself is fed by the Melii.
Right.
Yeah, which is the next point in this presentation.
Right.
And just real quick to finish up with the Naiads, they were placed in the stars as the Hyades, who are known as the horns of Taurus, and form the Golden Gate of the Ecliptic along with the Pleiades. And that makes me think of Nissa and all the door symbolism, but I don't know if that's a coincidence or not.
I don't think it's a coincidence, especially because the Pleiades we recognize it as 6 because one is now kind of behind it. But if you look at older civilizations, the 7th was visible. So you have your kind of last hero math, and then you X out Nissa from that equation.
Well, it's not last hero math. It's the 6 number that we see with the children of the forest and with the wildling spear wives. That's what you meant.
Yeah. Yes, that is what I meant. Yeah.
And so she is okay, so there's something about the title Mountain Mother that is associated with the Naiads, but my notes were, I wrote this down late at night and I don't remember what the connection was. But in Ice and Fire, Mysa means mother. Oh, that's what it was. Okay. So Dani is associated with the title Mysa, which means mother, and a mountain called the Mother of Mountains.
Right. And of course, the Zeus being raised by the Melii, that was on a big mountain.
Yes, it was a different mountain. That was Olympus, supposedly, I guess. But so yeah, the Mother of Mountains and the title Mysa are probably both coming from Mount Nysa, which is the root of Nissa. So,
right.
Now the Melii, they are nymphs of the mountain ash tree. So they live on the mountain, but are associated with these ash trees that grow on the mountain. And they are associated with honeybees and the honey sap of the ash tree, which is sort of a mythological concept. And among the Melii are the Hamadryads, which are the tree nymphs, the Oreads, which are mountain nymphs, and the Melissae, who are the bee nymphs. So this is a new thing. I had already looked at Melii and okay, well, they're ash tree nymphs. And in Ice and Fire, the weirwoods are symbolic ash trees. And then we have these children of the forest, and one's named Ashes. This all seems straightforward. Melisandre looks like a weirwood tree, and her name, Melanie of Ashai, sounds like Melii. But there's a class of Melii called the Melissae, so it's even worse.
Well, and she keeps, her big thing is that she keeps burning trees, which if you burn a tree, you're turning it to ash.
That's the idea. She burns the tree, so she represents a burning tree, really, is what she represents. The weirwood tree on fire, Nissa in the moment of sacrifice. Same idea.
The burning bush that is never consumed.
And so we see the Melii, Melissae. So that's Melisandre of Ashai, who has ashes in her eye, according to John. And so she is born of Gaia and Ornos. The Melii are, not she, they. And okay. We already read this. But the Melii, this is just a different version of what we already read. So this is the whole story about, she's born at the same time as Aphrodite. So when Ouranos takes the sickle, when Cronus, takes the sickle and castrates Ouranos, it says his body parts fell into the sea and made the foam, and the foam is his spermy seed. Obviously, that's the idea. There was also blood that fell, and the bloody drops that gushed forth, Gaia received, and from that blood came the Furies, the giants, the nymphs, specifically the nymphs that they call the Melii. So the Melii are born at the same time as Aphrodite, and they are the mothers of the bronze race of man, which is very interesting because we have these bronze wielding first men who come to worship the weirwood trees and the children of the forest. So they are under the thrall of the Melii, so to speak.
Well, in just to go a little bit off topic here, but Melian in the Silmarillion is basically a tree nymph. She's a Maiar who, along with an elven king, rules a kingdom from an underground throne of ash tree roots. And so like that's the first race of men. The way you look at it, the first race was the elves, and then the men came later. So yeah, it was.
So basically what George has done is he noticed Tolkien borrowing from the Melii, and he did his version of it. And so he put the children of the forest in an underground cave. Okay, and they've got red hair like Melisandre. One of them's named Ashes, and there's a tree throne down there. So yeah, Melii, Melian.
They used dryad magic to keep the bad people out, which they had in Silmarillion. It was called Melian's Girdle.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. So there you go. So Zeus made a third generation of mortal men, a bronze race sprung from ash trees. And this is a similar idea to the Norse myth about people coming from ash trees, obviously, both Proto-Indo-European. Let's see. But it was in no way equal to the Silver Age, but it was terrible and strong. They loved the lamentable works of Ares and deeds of violence. They ate no bread, but were hard of heart like adamant, fearful men. Great was their strength, and unconquerable the arms which grew from their shoulders on their strong limbs. Their armor was made of bronze, their houses of bronze, and bronze were their implements. There was no black iron. These were destroyed by their own hands, and passed to the dank house of chill Hades, and left no name. Terrible though they were, black death seized them, and they left the bright light of the sun. And the ancient Greeks made spear shafts from the wood of ash trees, so the sons of the Melian nymphs are intrinsically warlike. That is thought to be the explanation. And George is doing a lot with ash tree spears, isn't he?
Yeah.
Ashwood spears.
I mean, this is where you get the conflation between multiple different cultures you were talking about earlier. So obviously there's a lot of ash tree spear stuff going on in Norse mythology. You're also getting it from here in Greek mythology.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels that we've found. In the Norse myth, the first people are trees. And then after Ragnarok, the people are reborn from trees. So it's a recapitulation of the same idea. And so we have, the first men worshiping the weirwoods, and we've got the children of the forest. There's 6 of them in the cave, and there's 6 wildling spear wives. There's usually 6 Melii that raise Zeus. So that seems to be where that number came from. And the wildlings also carved up an ash tree with a face south of the wall, just to help us tie the weirwoods to the Norse and Greek ideas of the ash tree. So, so that pretty much is our nymphs. And now let's go back up to Rhiannon, because we finished with Danu. So it's time for Rhiannon. Yeah. Let me, do you need to go to the restroom or anything? I need like a 30-second.
Oh, yeah, it would be great if I could feed my dogs real quick.
Let's do that. I will play the new video again, and I'll be right back, folks.
All right.
And we're back. There was just a little bit of the dark ocean of chaos there. End creation. Beat drops for potty stops. That's good rhyming. All right. So again, shout out to Fleetwood Mac and Sean's dog's butt on this Mother's Day. So Rhiannon is a Welsh horse goddess and sovereignty goddess. And I'd like to thank... Oh, I'm not going to look up your name because I'll have to pull up the entire Discord on the screen. But the person in Discord who suggested Rhiannon and gave me a nice summary, thank you very much and well done. So this does come from the Discord. She is a Welsh horse goddess. And she is very much a sovereignty goddess. She has to be married by Welsh kings of a kingdom called Dyfed. Kind of like my name, David, but just crammed together. It's spelled Dyfed, but it's more of a V sound, Dyfed, something like that. So there's a couple different ones that had to marry her in different stories for legitimacy. So it's the same sovereignty goddess. She is golden-haired and rides a white horse. And by the way, Demeter, similarly, golden-haired and rides white horses. There's a lot of correlations between Demeter and Rhiannon that I noticed. So the Welsh hate vowels. They have a lot of extra letters that you don't pronounce. I'm going to figure out how to pronounce this Welsh stuff. Fortunately, there are Welsh speakers to learn from. So... she was, originally Rhiannon was engaged to one man, but married the king of Dyfed instead, which is interesting. It was Summer on Discord. Thank you, Morris. So shout out to Summer. And not only does she ride horses, there's this cool story about how she sits side saddle and she rides very placidly on her horse. So she's not straining or anything. Looks like she's riding slowly, but you can never catch her. So it's this interesting thing. And the first Welsh king that tries to marry her chases her for 2 days and can't catch her until he finally asks her to stop. And then she does. And she's like, you're silly. Why didn't you just say that from the beginning? I came here to marry you, but you chased me or something like that. So there's this whole permission thing. But you can't catch her. And she is, but then once you do like get her permission, then you can be the king and have royal offspring and all this stuff. She is related to a Celtic horse goddess named Epona, and like I said, potentially with Demeter as well, and probably a bunch of other Indo-European horse goddesses. In fact, there's an Indian story, Vedic Indian, about a woman called, what was her name? I'm not going to say it because I'll mispronounce it. I can't remember. But there is an equivalent in Indian folklore. Now, one of the big stories about Rhiannon is that she is wrongly blamed for cannibalizing her newborn son and made to serve penance. And this is probably one of the things that reminds us of Dany. Dany is blamed for feeding her baby to the darkness, using her baby for a magic ritual, essentially.
Which is wildly unfair. She only kind of does that. She
was just limping into the tent because Miri was the only midwife around. And it was kind of crazy outside. People were trying to kill her outside of the tent, too. Should be noted. In any case, Rhiannon is wrongly blamed. And the story goes like this. She is pregnant, and it takes the king has married her, and she does not have a kid for 2 years, and the king is getting pressure to set her aside as infertile. But the 3rd year, she has a kid. Now, the night that after she has the baby's in the care of 6 handmaidens, and somehow the baby turns up missing in the morning, and the handmaidens are afraid that they will be blamed. And so they find, I believe it's a calf or a foal, and they kill it. And they smear the blood on Rhiannon's face to make it look like she has eaten her baby. Pretty hardcore. And you remember Dany, she has the blood on her mouth when she eats the horse heart. And then later is blamed for killing her baby and also killing Viserys. So there's some pretty strong parallels there. Now, Rhiannon is looked at as guilty, but the king still loves her. And so the compromise is that she has to serve a penance. And she has to sit outside the castle and tell her story, but also offer to carry anyone on her back because she is a horse goddess. So she's doing horse things in some of these stories. And I'm not sure what the point of the penance is. Or the particulars of the penance. The theme of it is this idea of a dishonored, wrongfully blamed woman that we see in several stories. What would you say about that exactly, Sean? What are they trying to get at with that?
Well, are you talking about in terms of the mythology itself, or how
just the archetype of this wrongly blamed woman like Rhiannon?
I'd say that it folds in very well to the entire idea of us kind of delegitimizing goddesses as time goes on, delegitimizing the divine feminine in general.
Right. It's like treating it poorly. Yeah.
Right. And how that has consequences. Something that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier is where you have the Fisher King not taking care of the land, in a sense, not taking care of the Earth Mother. And so, the whole rulership in the land suffers.
I guess it has to be an unfair treatment, or else it doesn't make the point that it's a mismanagement and a poor stewardship, right?
Right. It is his fault. And then we have like the same idea with Huzor usurping the Fisher Queens, the idea of the Bloodstone Emperor usurping the Amethyst Empress, theoretically in Asshai, and now Asshai is a wasteland. So it's, similar idea we see threaded through A Song of Ice and Fire, because he got that from the real world.
Yeah, Maiden Made of Light, hiding her face in shame for a sin no one could discover. Similar idea. And so it is later revealed that it was a monster that stole her son. And this monster is revealed because there is a horse lord elsewhere in the land who is having his foals stolen instead of, a child like Rhiannon. But it's happening every night. And so he lays in wait, and he sees a black-clawed hand reaching through the window for his foal. And so he cuts it with his sword. He goes outside and finds Rhiannon's baby that was stolen. And so he cares for it and fosters it. But as the boy grows older, he's like, oh, this looks like the king. King's my friend. I recognize that nose and the jawline. And so he brings the child back to Rhiannon. And Rhiannon is obviously no longer thought of to be guilty. So she is, what's the word when you're...
Vindicated.
Vindicated, thank you. So that's the story. And this, if we think about it, like, it's a lot of similarities to Demeter. Demeter, also a horse goddess who couples with another horse god and creates a horse god. Her child is also stolen, Persephone. Not as a baby, but it's still a stolen fertility, stolen child motif. And Demeter, instead of being made to serve penance, she's like turning her back on the world. But it's still a similar shame, dishonor concept. Like, no, everything stops, And Demeter is associated with grain. So is Rhiannon. She's frequently depicted sitting on the horse sideways with sheaves of grain, like Demeter. A lot of golden imagery, and the white horses is in common. Demeter, we forgot to mention, she is actually called Lightbringer for her torches. That is an epithet.
And that's, again, kind of the separation out, but that's, very much a Hecate thing. Well, one thing that I'm glad you brought up in these bullets is Demeter's chariot being pulled by 4 white horses, because Hades' chariot is pulled by 4 black horses. And once again, like, Hades used to be part of Poseidon, married to Persephone, with some type of weird relationship with Demeter.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that they're kind of inverses is very important there.
Yeah, and then you've got Helios with the golden horses pulling his chariot. So that's cool. Okay, so then we've got the birds of Rhiannon. This is a cool one. So Rhiannon's got 3 birds, and their songs lull the living to sleep and awaken the dead. So this is more resurrection, life-giving, life-taking stuff. We've already covered it.
Right.
And even when you can barely see them on the horizon, their song sounds like it's right in your ear. So there's this weird temporal dislocation thing. And they are covered in one story. The birds of Rhiannon are coveted by a giant who demands them as a bride price for his daughter from a hero who was made to perform all these impossible tasks. And we don't need to tell the whole story, Sean. I can see your brain making the connection here.
No, it's a Song of Ice and Fire thing.
So let me finish making my point.
The birds.
What's that?
Small Paul wants Mormont's ravens.
He does. And he's kind of a giant. That's true. Okay. So Dany, of course, instead of having 3 birds, has 3 dragons that people covet. And it is Euron who is sending Vic to get Dany and her dragons. But then there's the Dragonbinder horn, which brings in the mesmerization part of the birds. The birds awaken the dead. There's a lot about the horn that awakes the sleepers, the horn that wakes the dragons or binds the dragons, awakens the dragon bond, and psychically controls, mesmerizes the dragons, and potentially the people at the Kingsmoot might have been hypnotized by the horn. So it seems like the birds of Rhiannon idea is pretty strong with Dany's dragons, especially with people trying to steal them like that.
Well, and from a symbolic perspective, if again, lemur theory, the dragons are literally resurrecting people because they are the houses for dead spirits.
I'm sorry. I looked at the chat. Say it again.
So the idea is, lemur theory again. If we're talking about the birds of Rhiannon resurrecting people, the 3 dragons of Dany would be dead spirits coming back to life in the form of a dragon.
Right, totally. Right. Yeah, or at least symbolically, if not literally. Yeah. So then there's another story about Rhiannon being the only one willing to confront death. Sometime in winter, death came and knocked at the door. And only Rhiannon was brave enough to go out. And she did this by taking off her normal clothes, wrapping herself in a black cloak. She goes out and meets a figure called the Grey Mare, who is an old crone, but who apparently is riding a horse as well. And so will you go ahead and read this little passage?
Sure. You did well to discard that cape, my dear. And Rhiannon recognized the cape as the shroud on the woman's back. Now won't you give my mare a rest? She sighed, stroking the ghostly grey head beneath her. Gladly, said Rhiannon. I will carry you wherever you wish to go. Then the old woman came to her and embraced her, and the rain rattled through the trees and the wind blew her tears away, and the grey mist cleared and there was only darkness.
So a couple of things here. Rhiannon is acting like a horse, again, carrying someone on her back. That's just to show you that she is a horse figure, horse character. And this is also similar to some of the other stories we've seen where it's like you have to treat the crone well, and then she reveals that she is not just a crone, and you treating her well turns out to be like a test of your character. So there's
Juno.
Go ahead.
Juno. Specifically, Juno, with the founding of Rome, had to be carried across the river, and she was in the form of a crone. When she got across the river, she turned into the queen of the gods and rewarded him.
Ah, that's very similar. Yeah, so this is the Irish version of this is a tale of someone called King Neil. And he is a bastard brother. He has 4 officially born royal brothers, daughters of the children of the queen, but his mother is a servant. And so he is mistreated and stuff and looked at as, like Jon Snow very much. And so he proves himself more worthy than his brothers to be the next king because when they are all out hunting, they come upon this crone at a well who demands a kiss in return for giving them her water from the well. So again, female goddess offering the water. You have to kiss her, but you can't judge her for looking like a crone. And she's described really haggard. I mean, it's a long description of how haggard she is. I didn't put it in here, but it's
the Maiden of High Heart.
It's fully, yeah. It's bad. It's bad. And so,
no, but I mean, she demands a kiss from.
Oh,
yeah.
You're totally right. Okay, so what happens is the 4 royal-born brothers, or 3 of them, won't kiss her at all. So they don't get any water. One of them gives her a quick peck on the cheek. And so she's like, prophesies that one day his descendants will rule this smaller kingdom. But along comes the bastard Neil. And he says, not only will I kiss you, I will lie with you. And then when he lies down with her, all of a sudden she's a beautiful woman. And she prophesies that him and his descendants will be king of Ireland. Or the kingdom in Ireland, it's Tara. It's Tara, which is one of the 5 kingdoms of Ireland. And then she explains, in this Irish myth, it's very direct. She says to Neil, I am sovereignty. And I appeared as a crone at first, because to gain sovereignty of the land, it will take battle and conquest, which is ugly. But eventually, you will rule a peaceful land, which will be fruitful and fecund, like the beautiful maiden form. And so there's a different meaning that is construed on it here, from the battle that is necessary to protect and form a nation to the peace that can potentially come after. So it's a very interesting way to use the crone and the maiden here. But it's the woman at the well, and it's the test and the water of fertility and all that stuff. So you start to see, hopefully, how all these different stories are working with similar concepts and ideas, right? So going back to Rhiannon, she met this crone that was death. And what did she do? She gave her the one black cloak that she had. She gave it to the old woman, and she gave her horse a rest by carrying her. And then she disappeared. She represents death. So this is like a conquering of death, or a repeal of winter, because this is winter, something like that. So I'd have to read the rest of the myth to be able to really explain it further. But you can see what's going on there.
Yeah, well, and more to your point, you're talking about like Rhiannon and Demeter riding side saddle and blah blah blah, and then we have like the legend of Lady Godiva, who's riding naked side saddle through the streets in order to save the peasants from tax. And it's a bunch of like May Queen fertility rituals for all of them.
And so chat's been lively today.
Yes.
And so that's Rhiannon, and you can see that there's multiple correlations to Dany's story in particular. And like I said, Dany's doing the sovereignty goddess thing, where it's only kings, really, that try to marry her. And not only is Dany riding a horse, Dany is likened to her horse. Her horse is called her silver, for the silver of her hair, Drogo says. So, like, Dany and the horse, it's like Drogon being a manifestation of Dany. The horse, the silver is the same. So Dany is a horse goddess and a river goddess, and pretty cool.
It's exemplified by the ritual: strength of the horse going to the rider, and blah blah blah.
So Daario is a kind of king in that he leads his company. He kills the other 2 members and takes over the company. But also, he can't marry her because he's not a full king. So there's kind of that commentary as well. She has to marry the king, and she says to him, "You're not a king, so I can't marry you."
It's also kind of funny because the name of the company that he's in is called the Second Sons. So it's like, yeah, of course she can't marry a second son.
Yeah, no. Good point. So there, I think, is that all? I think that's all of them.
So we had a couple we wanted to look at. So in Sloan Ranger is going to lose his mind in the chat if we don't eventually talk about the Cailleach.
Okay, and someone was asking for Brigitte too. We got all the ones on our list though.
Right. Yeah, those are just the ones that we were when we looked at kind of like the winter queens and some of those iterations.
So go ahead. Can you say something about the Cailleach, and I'll pull up the page on Brigitte.
Yeah, so the Cailleach is it's a figure in Gaelic mythology. She's a crone. She's associated with winter. She's really the largest inspiration for the White Queen in C.S. Lewis's Narnia.
Okay.
But she's a pretty typical winter goddess. She's both a creator and a destroyer. You know, obviously, if she's going to be involved with winter, she's a big part of the death cycle. But she's also a part of she's associated with life and rebirth and that kind of stuff. She's revered for her wisdom, knowledge of the natural world. So, you know, it's very much the crone goddess figure. Divine hag, sometimes she's called. But yeah, there are a number of legends that we probably don't want to go too much into. But she is associated with at least 20 other winter goddess figures, everyone from Frau Holly to God, I can't even remember them now, but there are a million different winter queens. It's a pretty pervasive theme. She does ride a sled that is pulled by, you know, magical animals that fly. So we've seen that before, right?
Yeah, and that gets into some wild hunt stuff that you were also mentioning, sort of off the record to me. I had forgotten to mention the Morrigan is the consort of the Dagda, who is the great god of Irish folklore. He turns the seasons in particular. So that is more nature mythology. But let me pull up Brigitte here. And so what's the summation of the Cailleach? It's basically just Knight's Queen, Corpse Queen type.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much, but like the death cycle part of it, because there's a Knight's Queen that has a fertility aspect, right? Because she's giving these she's giving birth to these children or to these shadows or whatever, but it's kind of corrupted, and also it's what you were talking about earlier with the baby being stolen, and then the person who vindicated her later was having his foals that were being stolen. It's kind of like giving sheep to the others.
Right, and the sheep are stand-ins for his sons, and then John, who is a potential other sacrifice, is wearing the sheepskin, and all the wildlings are wearing sheepskin because they are food for the others. Yeah.
All right.
So Bridget, or Brigitte, is the older name. She is also a goddess of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and she is a daughter of the Dagda. So I don't know if her mother is the Morrigan or not, but her name means exalted one. She sort of later became Christianized as Saint Brigitte. And she is, let's see here.
So it's funny that you bring up Brigitte, because Brigitte and the Cailleach are the two sides of the same coin.
Oh.
They're the winter and summer queens.
I see. Yeah, she's associated with fire and the hearth, most famously,
right.
But also warfare. Goddess of healers, poets, smiths, childbirth, and inspiration. So this is a lot of arts, crafts, and stuff. Because again, all the Tuatha Dé Danann are associated with the arts and the crafts and light. So her soldiers were called brigands. Oh, that's funny. And let's see. This is why I make notes, so I obviously don't have to read through stuff to pull out the details. She is the wife of Bres, the half-Fomorian ruler of the Tuatha Dé Danann. That's interesting. And their song Rhiannon wounded the smith god Gobniu, who we mentioned, at the second battle of Mag Turid, but he himself was slain in combat. Brigitte then went to the battlefield to mourn her son. This is said to be the first keening or lament. So there's that widow's wail symbol, I guess, that idea. She has 3 children. People have sort of compared her to Dani, but I'm not really sure what the link is other than just being a goddess of fire. I don't see any other details that really remind me of Dani.
Well, she's a spring goddess and therefore associated with the dawn. So there's going to be a certain amount of, dawn and light bringer ideals here.
The genealogy of Bridget. Okay, this is a Christianized thing.
You trying to figure out who her mother is?
No, I'm just trying to figure out what are the other major details about her. Sometimes the Wikipedia is better for quickly getting the stuff. It doesn't go into detail on anything, but it will more quickly give you the broad strokes. Her sacred tree appears to have been the birch. Let's see. The goddess whom poets adored. She had two sisters, Bridget the healer and Bridget the smith. Okay, so that makes her a triple deity. There's an older Celtic goddess, Brigantia. Wisdom, healing, protection.
It all ends up basically manifesting out of the Tuired, however you pronounce that, the great battle between King Lugh and Baelor.
Definitely associated with keening, which reminds me again, that's the Morrigan and her Bav form. Similar concept.
Banshee.
Yep. And then also the mead of poetry, the intoxicating, frenzied inspiration that we see with a lot of these goddesses. We see that here as well.
Yeah, that was something you brought up yesterday. Something about a poet being born and reborn or reincarnated after a seed from the mead of poetry.
Yeah, that's Carrie Dwen. She seems to be another Irish folk figure she's Welsh. No. Is Taliesin Irish or Welsh? Welsh. I've been slamming both.
I'm no help here.
Sorry, let me just make sure.
I do remember, if it's Welsh, you have a possibility of pronouncing it. If it's Gaelic,
it's Welsh. Up. Okay, so Taliesin and Carrie Dwen. Here's the story. So Carrie Dwen, she is thought to be based on a goddess, but basically she's a special woman. She is brewing the mead of poetry, or the Welsh equivalent of it, in a cauldron. And it's for her son, so that her son will be brilliant. But there is a boy who's hired to stir it. And somehow it spills. And a couple drops spill on his finger, and his finger is burned. He sucks on his finger, and now he is brilliant. He's got the mead of poetry. But he's also in trouble because it was meant for her son. And so he flees from Carrie Dwen, and he disguises himself as a grain of wheat somehow. It's because the mead of poetry is brewed from honey mead, so you're going to use wheat, I believe in that. But essentially, he's a grain of wheat, and she eats him. But then she gives birth 9 months later to Taliesin, who is the reborn version of this boy. And he is brilliant. He's the bard, and he's got that mead of poetry. But she can't kill him now because he's her son now. And so Carrie Dwen banishes him or something like that. I forget how the rest of the story goes. But that's how he becomes Taliesin, the great bard of Welsh tradition, is by ingesting that mead of poetry. So, but it was sort of stolen, which the mead of poetry is always stolen.
Right. It's like an apple of immortality.
Yes, people are always trying to fight over them. So, and we see that in the Idun and her apples from Norse myth. She's the guardian of these apples of immortality, and so she's abducted by Thiazi, the eagle ice giant or falcon giant, and has to be rescued by Loki because Loki sold her out to Thiazi in the first place. The gods make him rescue her. Yeah, so.
than the apples of immortality with the Hesperides at the Garden of Twilight in the Island of Sunset. Yeah.
How does that go?
The daughters of Atlas guard this garden where the apples of immortality are, and Hercules goes in there to steal one. I think somebody else steals one at one point, but yeah, it's
I
one
should
of
look
the
that
one of
up
the
and see if
labors,
there's
I
more
believe.
Sansa stuff there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Sansa, by the way, a type of apple, and her story correlates to Idun and Persephone. So Sansa is stolen away by Littlefinger, who is a mockingbird posing as a falcon by usurping the Eyrie. And Thiazi steals Idun away to a mountain castle, a snowy mountain castle, because he's an ice giant. And so literally Peter Baelish associated with the Titan of Braavos via his sigil on a mountain called the Giant's Lance. So it's literally a giant's ice castle where he's abducted Sansa. And Sansa, again, also named after an apple. Go ahead.
He's a giant who's coveting a bird.
Oh, he is, too. You're right, little bird. So there's more birds of Rhiannon again, too. That's good. That's a good connection. And so, so Sansa being returned to Winterfell, she's looked at as the key to Winterfell, just as the apples of immortality keep the Olympian gods alive, and so they have to get her back. Sansa is hot property, like anyone who, she's got a strong claim to Winterfell. So,
right. Well, and he's covetous of the Aran Falcon as well, and Robin's position as the de facto ruler of the Eyrie. So there's his 3 birds.
Right. Okay. And then the Persephone myth, of course, is referenced because Peter tries to serve her pomegranates and she passes and he eats them instead. Right. So it's like, oh, you didn't read your Hades Persephone myth. So will Sansa will she be stuck with Peter or stuck in the Vale? No, none of that. She's going to eventually be free of that because she did not eat the pomegranate seeds. So that was fun because it's like not just copying the myth, but using the myth to show you that she's going to go a different way.
Right.
So I think that's probably a good place to stop. That's 3.5 hours of goddess mythology. I think we pretty much
nailed that. Shout out to the moms.
What's that?
Shout out to the moms.
Shout out to the moms. Yep. Happy Mother's Day, everyone, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Definitely a lot of fun to prepare. Thank you, Sean, for bringing so much to the presentation.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was still largely your baby. I learned a lot about Rhiannon and the other ones, so that was nice. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Well, I really needed the help with the Greeks, so I think together we got this. We distilled down the themes. This is what I wanted to do, is not just sort of point at all the goddesses, but really help people understand what Ancient Man was talking about with these forms, and have that please help enhance our understanding of ice and fire. So,
all right.
There you go. Thanks, guys. Happy Mother's Day, and make sure you're subscribed to Sean's channel. And
please watch my Beowulf video.
Please watch his Beowulf. Is it out yet?
Yes.
Okay. So go watch it right now. There you go.
All
right, chat. Thanks a lot. And if you could, by the way, on the way out, hit refresh, leave a comment, tell me what you think of the stream, how much you enjoyed it. That'll really help the video. So cheers. I'll see you soon with another video.
Cheers, Myth Fam.